Welcome to What's in a Game. On today's show, the Oklahoma City Thunder go up 3-2 in the NBA Finals. Are we drawing to an inevitable conclusion? But first, NBA Christmas has come early as the Orlando Magic dropped the first major domino of the NBA offseason. And what is Denver up to in their front office? We'll break it all down. Stay tuned. Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean here with my co-host Will Jones. How are you doing today, Will?
A bit of good and bad. Thunder look to have control of the finals, but the NBA, while things are looking dire in its direction, there are some little interesting, positive tidbits that are going on. And we're not going to talk about KD and Giannis rumors. We'll talk about those things should they happen. But the fact that Giannis is looking to one, stay in Milwaukee, which I think is
Or
hilarious.
is at least not looking to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is better for everyone because I would love for him to stay there and the Bucks to be irrelevant and not any other super
and stay
teams.
in the East.
Yeah, and
everybody when they leave, they just come west, and that's annoying.
Yeah, and KD is not wanting to go to Minnesota, which I find pretty hilarious. And I mean, him going to the Spurs would still be possibly concerning. Like there are teams he could go to in the West that I think could improve them for sure, but right now, like I would rather
he's not going east because Miami doesn't have anything good to trade.
Yeah, although I would rather him go to the Heat, but
well, yeah, but I'm saying like he's not because
yeah,
that just never happens for us.
I know. So there's some like interesting developments with these rumors that I think are interesting to follow.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
If anybody followed our show, anybody who still follows our show, hi HMUs. Follow us last off season. Like this is my shit. Okay, like I love all the off season rumors and everything. We're gonna get into some really some things that actually happened as opposed to just rumors. Yeah, this is the thing that a lot of people talk about with the NBA. Like, let me complain about it. Like, teams are always changing, and like players never, stay the same places. But it is one of the more compelling aspects of the NBA for. I don't even think it's just for the casual fan. Obviously, I'm also interested in this kind of thing too because you're constantly building and rebuilding teams around different combinations of players and all of that. So I'm excited to get into that stuff. But as for dealing with the the fact that the Oklahoma City Thunder look like they're about to roll here, it helps that I got a little bit into hockey last year thanks to all of my Colorado mutuals being such big Avs fans on my timeline. And as a result, I started watching the Florida Panthers, who just clinched the Stanley Cup last night. So that was nice. Even less so because, the team from my, home state won, and more because Edmonton lost. And I don't have anything against the Oilers for any Oilers fans that may or may not be watching the show. But I have a just on principle, I am against Canadian sports teams.
Which is funny because you love Jamal.
I do. I don't have anything against like a lot of individual Canadian athletes unless they're against my favorite figure skaters.
You just
but
feel,
that's where it all stems
it's
from.
figure skating that it comes from. That makes sense.
Comes from figure skating. So that was really nice. I was like, please give me an uneventful title clinching game, and I don't know.
I didn't even know they won last night, so congrats.
You didn't? You couldn't tell from my time. I guess I didn't tweet about it that much, but I was just like, I was kind of on pins and needles the whole game because it actually didn't feel as lopsided as the score indicates. But yeah, that was really nice. That's a fun, very tense sport. I don't think I'm built for hockey as a fan. Like, it is just too on the edge. Too many like fluky things can happen.
Yeah, I feel bad for my Avs mutuals where it's like fluke goals and deflections and injuries and
oh my god,
the Chuskin drama and like I don't know, man, it's rough.
Yeah.
But there are some parallels to the Nuggets that I find interesting with the Avs.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I've heard a lot of people comparing the two because both franchises are owned by the same ownership group. We're going to get into
mhm,
some of what they've been up to, but I don't actually find that much similarity in terms of the approach that both teams have
yeah,
taken with their rosters lately. So I think that's maybe more of like
I think
extrapolating where it isn't, but
I think hockey teams and the NHL in general, they've always been operating with salary cap uh situations that are really tight. Like money is always tight for every
right.
NHL
They
team.
have they have an actual hard
Yeah.
salary cap in the NHL, which
So that
maybe in the NBA you can say like, well, the second apron is starting to act as that
yeah.
in the
So
NBA.
it's getting a little
But
more
that's a
similar,
new
but
development, right? So it's interesting, as soon as of course, like because I don't do anything halfway, I'm like scouring the hockey pods after these games and everyone's talking about what's going to happen in the off season. It's interesting hearing how they talk about team building in, under a hard salary cap, which the NHL has been under for several years, well over a decade now. So
yep.
that's interesting. I'll probably be listening to that more just to see like what could be on the horizon if the NBA is kind of entering a similar dynamic. Okay, well, but don't worry, guys. This is still a basketball podcast. I don't even know what a neutral zone is. Like, I am just a super casual hockey fan. So, won't linger on that too much. Just wanted to share my joy at that from yesterday. A couple of programming notes. We will be back Friday if the finals are over and or if the Denver Nuggets actually make some kind of announcement with respect to their front office. Because of course the Thunder have a chance to clinch the finals tomorrow. We are, streaming this on Wednesday. I guess it's afternoon for a lot of you. It's still morning for me. Um so yeah, if the finals are over, we'll of course cover that. Otherwise, we'll wait until next week to cover both games 6 and 7 and see what happens there. Please do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps us out with the algorithm. We're trying to hit 1,000 subs before the end of the playoffs, but I don't know if we're gonna get there. I don't think we're gonna get there. We're currently at 958. So we're really, really close. And it'd be really cool if we could get there early in the summer. So please help us out and like and subscribe. All right, let's get into the news. We're gonna get progressively more not salacious, but tasty with our news items today. So the first one that we've got here is Steven Adams agreeing to a 3-year extension with the Houston Rockets. This was reported by Shams just a couple days ago. 3 years, $39 million, approximately 13 million a year. So I looked it up, and this is projected to be just under the full mid-level exception. Um, there was a new rule implemented under the new CBA when it was enacted in 2023 that said you are allowed to start negotiating with your own free agents after the finals are over. The finals are not over, but this news came after the Thunder got that game 4 that we did our last show. We did our last show after game 4 and 5. So technically, these conversations are allowed to be happening after the finals are over, before the start of free agency, whereas before that would have been considered tampering. And I was kind of like, did the Rockets look at game 4 as the unofficial end of the NBA finals? Because they're like, if the
It's
Thunder tied up this series and the Pacers kind of gave up that opportunity, it's done.
probably what they should have.
So this is reported out by Shams, but I don't think anything's been made official because technically these conversations are not yet supposed to be happening. We did see last. I wanted to bring attention to that rule because we're probably gonna see a lot of activity immediately after the finals do officially end. We did see last year. I can't remember if it was the night of or the very next day after the Celtics won the title. We got the news about Pascal Siakam signing his extension with the Indiana Pacers. You are still, as a team, not allowed to talk to free agents that are not like on your team right now about like extensions or whatever. But uh yeah, that's just something to look out for immediately after the finals end. We'll probably get a lot more of these types of announcements. The other big one that surprised me, and I don't remember if it was the next day or like it was within the 2 days after the finals, was Malik Monk extending with the Sacramento Kings because I really wanted Orlando to go after him last summer. Um, so those are the kinds of deals that you might actually just see happening very, very quickly before like they're not rumors anymore. Like those extensions might just be happening. It's one of those things that I've tried to point out under the new CBA, and there are lots of rules that kind of add to this dynamic, but it's one of the things that lends itself to um the way that roster building happens favoring extensions as opposed to entering free agency,
Yeah.
which I think, adds to um, a relatively scarce free agent class once free agency opens on July 1st, right? All right. Next news item, we got Billy Donovan is working on an extension with the Chicago Bulls, and this one just wanted to hit on really quickly. Um, well, does Billy Donovan have the most job security, like the most inexplicable job security of any head coach in the NBA?
Possibly. I mean, they liked him in OKC. Clearly, they both kind of agreed that it was becoming stale there, and then he moved to the Bulls. But he's always been very respected and solid as a coach. But I could see a scenario where the Bulls, I mean, they are supposed to be tanking, so will them losing a lot of games get him fired? Probably not, unless the front office.
Unless they don't make the play in. I think that's the lie. Don't
Why?
you can't make the play in the East.
If you don't make the play, they should just be tanking. I don't know what they're thinking, but
They want the play-in media money, which is dumb. But, I don't know. I'm not is it the Reinsdorfs that still own the Bulls?
who?
The Reinsdorfs?
Oh,
Is it
yeah.
Jerry Reinsdorf that owns the Chicago Bulls?
I don't know actually who the owners are now, but
Yeah,
they've
that's right.
been directionless for a while and not making any bold moves or
Well, the
picking a
direction
lane.
is very clear. It's make the play-in. That's
Make
the
the play in.
direction.
Why that would be it? But the Mavs were a play-in team who just got the first pick in the draft, so they could thread that needle just like they did. If you
True.
want the 1.6 or percent chance you get the first pick, the Hawks and the Mavs both had those odds. The last 2 years, it worked out. You never know.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be because of the not completely flat, but flattened lottery odds. A team like Utah ends up with what did they end up with? Like 8 in the lottery, and they were the clear worst team in the league, which is crazy because the Wizards do exist.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then yeah, the Mavs, who were in this very similar position, I think they had equal lottery odds to the Chicago Bulls, end up with the number one pick. So they're just like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. We don't need another. They don't need a number one pick anyway. They're fine. Um, so that was interesting, just in light of all the coaching change that's happening across the rest of the league. The Bulls are like, nope, we're good. We can keep everything the same. So I guess it could be worse, folks. All right, let's get to the last news item, which is pretty big for Denver, which is Tommy Balcetis is out. He is not being retained by the Denver Nuggets. And, I had we had our who done it joke about what's going on with the front office last week. And I said it was Josh in his office with the paperweight. He killed him. No, Tommy is alive. But, we haven't actually gotten official word from the Denver Nuggets on this yet. But this news about Tommy Balcetis, who is for anybody that doesn't know, the assistant general manager, or was the assistant general manager under both Tim Conley and Calvin Booth for the last, I think, 7 years in Denver. Which is, interesting how long he's been here. He's been with the organization, I think, since 2013. That's right. He came in as the head of analytics at that point, analytics and scouting. He was the one who sat in on Duran's introductory press conference and, was referred affectionately as Mr. Tommy. But we haven't gotten official word from the team on this yet, which I think is interesting. We have gotten reports from first this account. Our reports was the first one reported. It's just giving credit there, and then confirmed by Ben Durando from the Denver Post and Adam Maris from DNVR. I want to draw attention to like the Tommy aspect of this GM saga because I found the direction that this line went to be a little convoluted, right? We are on day 71 without a general manager since Calvin Booth was fired. Of course, we've had Ben Tenzer interim for some large chunk of that, right? But last week, it was reported by Bennett Durando that the Nuggets were not expecting to name anybody last week. Well, if you could bring this up. This was from Bennett's Denver Post article. Bennett reported team and league sources indicated to the Denver Post on Monday, this was Monday of last week, not 2 days ago, that the Nuggets were not expected to have a full-time general manager in place this week. These situations can change fast, so Bennett editorializing a bit there. And they didn't. But when I read this last week, I was like, how is it Monday, 2 weeks before the draft, and you're telling reporters that you're not like, I'm assuming that Bennett has sources that are pretty high up, the ones that are actually involved in this coaching source. So I have to make some assumptions there. I have no idea who his sources are, but based on the ones that, based on the information that they have, because they knew that Denver wasn't going to name anyone last week, I have to assume they're pretty high up. I don't know. Did you see this report last week? Well, when I think I shared it out and I was just kind of like, what? It's Monday. There's 5 days till the end of this week. And you're telling them like, nope, nothing's happening this week.
I'm muted. Not expected to make a hire. That was pretty interesting. But Ari did report that they've interviewed people. We just don't know who.
Right. He did report that. Or they did.
So there you go.
So Bennett actually followed. So this was interesting because I think this was a day that we did a show. So I remember after our show, I was checking out DNVR and I was reading the article, and I think Adam was actually talking about the fact that like, hey, it's kind of weird that like we haven't heard about Tommy being a GM candidate. He talked about that on his show that happened, I think, right before our live stream, but either followed or was like concurrent with like the time that Bennett's article came out that day. Within the next hour, Bennett followed up his report with a tweet because so it's the next day that he follows up this report. Adding to this, in addition to any potential outside candidates, it's expected that both Ben Tenzer and Tommy Balcetis will be internal candidates for GM as the process moves forward, per team source. Well, I thought this was the strangest thing because we are now well over 2 months into what should have been a GM search. Let's say they actually waited until the Nuggets were out of the playoffs to actually start contemplating what the front office is going to look like next season, which is crazy to me, but whatever. It's been well over a month since the Nuggets were eliminated from the playoffs. And this is the time that you're, feeding information to reporters about like, oh yeah, and we're also considering Tommy. Like he's expected to be someone that we will consider. And I'm like, what is going on with this timeline here? Okay. I have to ask you, Will, before I get to the last piece here, was Tommy ever really being considered for the general manager position? What, like, before or after Bennett's like addendum to this report?
Well, it's really weird because the timing of these incidents and events leads me to believe that they weren't, because they weren't initially saying he was up for the, consideration for this role.
The fact that they felt the need to like
put something out there.
Yeah.
But then they moved on from him. So it's like, I don't think that something could have happened that could have shifted. I mean, there are rumors that maybe Stan and Josh aren't agreeing on the direction of this GM search. Can't substantiate that. It's just like what I've heard from people who have sources with the Nuggets talking about that.
Actual reporters.
Yeah,
That's
actual
not what we are.
reporters.
We are reckless
We're
speculators here.
fan podcasters. But yeah, so based on that, I could see maybe some things changing quickly, but it does look like a little bit like they were trying to save face and saying like, "Hey, we did consider all of our guys, and then we made a decision on it." But I don't know. Maybe they should have just moved on from him a little sooner. But yeah, the timing was weird. The timing with all this is weird. That's just the general theme. That's the only consistent thing with this
Is that everything's
process.
weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have here in my notes that a bit of reckless speculation of my own, which is Tommy's been here a very long time. And if you could put up this this last piece by Bennett here, where this is from Bennett's most recent piece. This is in the article about Tommy being let go. Says, but when the Nuggets fired Calvin Booth in April, their G League affiliate general manager Ben Tenzer was named interim GM rather than Balcetis, who was assistant general manager at that time. I thought that was weird. I was just like, oh, Ben, okay, that's different. Whatever. But it was noted at the time, right? But Bennett goes further here and says that it reveals how the team ownership, which, as lots of media members have felt the need to clarify over the last 2 weeks, is Stan Kroenke, owner and governor of the Denver Nuggets, felt about the front office hierarchy, which I was kind of like thinking when, Adam Maris first brings this up last week of like, why isn't Tommy being considered? Why was he not the one that was named interim? That's kind of weird. And like I said, he's been here since 2013. He came in as the head of analytics, became assistant GM, along the way. And I just think he was like, I don't think they wanted to let him go, right? Because if they wanted to, they could have let him go earlier, like they did with the assistant coaches, and said, we're going in a different direction, right? Like, it's not going to be you. But I think for Tommy, it was like, I feel like I'm being like passed over for this job. And I'm not going to stay on as like assistant general manager while you guys like figure out who's going to be leading this ship. So I'm going to go. That's my guess. This is my reckless speculation is I don't think it was Denver moving on, or like you could say it was mutual, but I think it was more like, if I had to guess, like Tommy initiated.
Yes, I think that would be logical because he wasn't hired as the interim GM, so he's already like a step out of the job from that point on. He doesn't really know what direction they're going, as do many people who are observing this Nuggets team. And yeah, I would see him just reading between the lines and seeing there's not much opportunity there for him or growth for him there. And it may be time for him to go to another team where he can like start working his way up and using his skills, because a lot of Nuggets fans were bemoaning this move. They liked him as a basketball mind, and he built the analytics department with the Nuggets right now. So some concern there, but hopefully, like I'm just wishing the best for him. It's why we didn't say like he was fired or anything like that, because we don't really know.
Well, that was not
Yeah,
the
the wording.
reporting anyway. It
Yeah.
seems like there are a lot of people in the front office whose contracts are set to expire.
Yeah,
So
that are just
similar to, I mean, Calvin Booth is really the only one that was like fired, even though they were like, well, we're gonna let your contract expire, but you're gone before the end of the year. That's
Yeah.
a firing. They're kind
Yeah.
of letting these guys' contracts expire, which is like kind of the same thing, but not at the same time. So yeah, I think this is really interesting. Mike Weisberg, they waited until the contract expired in case another team would potentially pick him up. Sure, but you could have let him go like a month ago. And I have some thoughts on that too. So, I've spent a lot of time the last few shows trying to make the case that the front office itself has become stale. And it's not anything to do with the particular people, but the fact that like it's all the same like milieu of the same, people that have been talking to each other and going about
Mhm.
the business of the organization in the same way. But it does sound like the organization is trying to make some rather major structural changes. If you want to believe that it was not Tommy initiated his leaving, um, they're just going a completely different direction. Maybe they don't. Maybe Stan Kroenke is like, fine, you can have a president of basketball operations, but you can't have an assistant general manager on top of that. So I'm not paying two people. So we're gonna go through a completely different structure. I don't know that. Maybe they want to completely re-outfit the analytics department. I don't know that either. And Tommy was not head of analytics anymore. He was the assistant general manager. I want to make that very clear. But it sounds like they're going to be going through some changes, whether Ben Tenzer is the guy or not. And I'm still, there's a lot of people that want to speculate that this must mean they're going like external for general manager and or president of basketball operations. I feel like the fact that we got news about Tommy being sort of eliminated from the process and nothing about Ben means it's probably going to be Ben still, in addition to everything else we've heard about this process, which is just Ben's the interim. Ben has had Josh's ear. Josh has gone to bat for Ben in multiple recent press conferences to try to make the case for him and sort of lay that groundwork. And now Tommy's out, so it feels like it's going to be him. Otherwise, they've spent a lot of time going through this process. Like I said, 71 days since they fired Calvin Booth. And even longer when you think about it, since Josh decided that he wasn't going to renew Calvin, because that decision was made ahead of time, even though they let Calvin go before the end of the season. They knew they weren't going to be renewing his contract. I don't know what they were trying to evaluate when it comes to whether we're just going to like fill this position with a new person or we're going to go a completely different direction with the structure of our front office or whatever it is. I don't know. But they've had a long time to do this, and now we are sitting. Is it 7 days until the first night of the NBA draft? Remember, we have a 2-day draft now, starting last year. So here's my question to you, Will, about like why this timing? Like, why is this all like? Okay, we get it. You want to make major changes. That may be good, maybe bad. We don't know. But for anybody that wanted change, it sounds like it's coming. But it's taken so long. So, Will, are the Denver Nuggets just waiting for the NBA Finals to be over so that they can announce Bob Myers as the new president of basketball operations?
Gosh, that would be such a shocking move to get somebody of his stature. I don't necessarily know that he would be the best person to bring in, but he did a very good job with Golden State. He's been in the media for a while now. He has the, just like a huge presence to him. That would signal quite a move from the ownership. But if you are actually serious about trying to make the coach and the GM align as much as possible, I don't know that you'd bring in someone that experienced who, because now the issues of not being able to hire the coach.
Well, didn't you hear? Well, David Adelman is like super flexible. He'll do whatever.
Oh, it doesn't matter because they're so high up. They're so experienced that, yeah, it's just, we've gone over it on the show so many times that they're going to want their own coach eventually. They're going to have such a big vision and strong perspective that I just, like, if Tenzer was hired, I don't know whether he's the right person for the job either. Him and DA came from the same, like, standing where they were assistants who then got promoted to the top. I would see more like alignment between them. They were both already there, both new, both young. Now the question is do they have can they separate themselves enough to look at things more objectively, which may be needed, as opposed to somebody like a Bob Myers might be able to. So that's a trade-off, but I don't think we're getting Bob Myers. I would be shocked.
I mean, I don't either because I agree. I'd be shocked. I will say, like, technically, like, Ben in this scenario would still be the general manager. So, but like Bob here is like a more supervisory, like figurehead type role in terms of being president of basketball operations. And he's got a lot on his plate, so maybe that's all he could handle. I also wouldn't want somebody with divided attention in that position, if I'm being honest. Like we already know, like Josh has a bunch of teams that he has to, keep an eye on and pay attention to. So it'd be nice if the president of basketball operations of the Denver Nuggets didn't also have, football teams to worry about, for example. The logic behind this being the direction they're going, whether it's Bob Myers or somebody else that's just like super high up. Although I brought up Bob Myers as the example because it's like, are they waiting until after the NBA finals, right? Because he's doing the halftime show. We know last year the league sort of stepped in and said, we're not going to be talking about JJ Redick, to the Lakers while he's, doing our NBA finals broadcast, for example, and JJ like refused to answer any questions about like the interview process and all that until after the finals were done. But in light of how they handled the coaching staff, as I mentioned earlier, which was to let them go early and kind of make decisions about who was going to stay as soon as possible so that they could make alternative plans. It is kind of weird that like a month later, there's all these front office people that still don't know, because we don't know who else is like maybe staying, maybe going. Haven't been informed of what their fate was going to be, about whether Denver wanted to retain them. But in the case that you were going after somebody that you wouldn't be able to hire in terms of like that figurehead role that might want to reshape things under you, if you couldn't get them until after the finals, which is like less than a week before the NBA draft, kind of need to keep using the people that you've got working basketball operations to do things like conduct draft workouts, which we had reports of from Youngmisuk that the Nuggets have been working out guys that are sort of projected late second rounders and undrafted guys to keep running their analytics, to keep working the phone lines. Kind of made it sound a little too much on our last show, like, well, they don't have a permanent general manager, so like nobody's answering the phones. That wasn't really my point. My point was like, it's difficult to negotiate with somebody that you don't know will be in power in however long, which is when things would be allowed to be made official. So that was my gripe with all this. But there are people that are working there right now.
That's an important point for sure.
And so they're like, we're gonna need to use these people. We don't know if we're gonna keep them, but we need to keep using them. So we have to keep them on until this happens. And it sounds like this is the time when they're kind of shaking things up and sort of in preparation for like Bob or whoever potentially, this is speculation, want to bring in his own people and like this, that, and the other. But he can't do that right now because he's working the NBA finals, right? You talked about like Bob Myers with his example specifically, because it could be him. Like this is like a name that people have been throwing out there ever since Calvin got fired, in terms of like fans being interested in this. I don't know that we've actually heard any kind of rumor about Bob Myers actually being considered for this job, but let's talk about him specifically in case it is him, right? Like you said, he did a good job with the Warriors. Everyone talks about they had a super team. They got Kevin Durant. They also won 2 titles without Kevin Durant, right? And, he was kind of important to that super failed 2 timeline plan that the Warriors had going on, which is not great. But maybe he learned lessons from that he could bring here as Denver to sort of run into a lot of the same issues that Golden State did in trying to, keep together a rather expensive championship core. And obviously Golden State was not able to retain like a Klay Thompson, but it's still Steph and Dre there, and, trying to figure out like what are the best pieces to put around these guys. Obviously you don't want to end up like the Warriors did, but Bob Myers also hasn't been with them the last couple of years. When I say how the Warriors did, I mean the last couple of years. Obviously you'd like to end up with multiple championships across some kind of window, right? Friend of the show, Voya Medic made a joke. It's like overpaying to get Bob Myers just to sign, was it Looney and Dennis Smith Jr. on minimums would be hilarious. And I was like, Looney on a minimum sounds freaking awesome. If Bob Myers could, I mean, forget connections. He just like no, like I think he was involved in drafting that player, right? Mike Weisberg says Bob was also an agent for a very long time prior to becoming in management. People forget he was an assistant GM before ever getting the GM role with Golden State. That's a really good point. A lot of these guys are former agents, and that's how you make connections, right? It's not just with the players that you represented, but with the representation of other players from agents that you know. Like that's why a lot of these front office guys are agents, is because they have those connections that enhance your ability to perform that job. Nadeem says only guesswork, but likely Ben Tenzer or Bob Myers. Bob is a great guy. Players love him, but he did have Kirk Lakeup and Joe on top of him constantly. That's true, but he also had Joe Lakeup being like, spend whatever, I don't care. We're getting the chase sitter.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think the Cronkies are going to be like that if he were to come here. My overall assessment of like if it's Bob Myers is like that's interesting, but I still don't love how long this process took. I think I said on a previous show that the only move that would make like the amount of time and like lost, like it's not just the time, but like the lost ability to have taken part in things like draft night trades, try to sneak Najee into a deal somewhere. Just like, oh, you guys need some matching salary. Like, here's $8 million. We'll just throw that in. You can just have it. Just you don't even have to send us anything. Don't worry about it. Um, is if it was Brad Stevens and if they were like poaching Brad Stevens from the Celtics, I think like that would be the one.
Well, I have a
Yeah.
question for you about this.
Go ahead.
We had rumors about Tim Connolly maybe coming back because the Wolves situation was a little
Up in the air.
weird, but that didn't pan out. And then,
Yeah.
Bob Myers is another name, of course, but no one, maybe some people are talking about this, but possibly trying to get Masai back could be something because he's been rumored to some other organizations already. And it's like, is he looking to leave?
There was a name that I saw. Do you remember which team it was? I vaguely recall Masai to X team being rumored, and I was just like, what? I don't know why he would leave Toronto is my answer.
Well, he's been there for a while. He got them a championship. I feel like he's been trying to get in trade talks. Like every time, like a KD goes on the market or whoever goes on the market, it's always like, well, the Raptors are maybe a
yeah, because they take big swings, right?
Yeah,
or
but
they took a big swing, and so you know that they're an organization that's willing to be that team.
Yeah, and I like that, but I feel like they lose out a lot of the time on those big ones, and I'm like,
there's 30 teams.
maybe
Everybody
Masai's
loses out
ready to
sometimes.
go be with Jokic and build around him and take some swings. I mean,
That would be interesting.
And Stan could be someone who recognizes that. And if they, like Jeff Morton was saying, are more aware of how important this decision is, more than usual for times when they hire a general manager, could they go for someone like him?
Very possible. I'm really skeptical because I just don't think they want to pay.
Yeah, that's
somebody
the question always. Yeah,
to be general manager. I think Masai is compensated handsomely in Toronto, and very respected there. I think that's why he left, right? They were paying him more. That's why he left Denver in the first place. So I'd be skeptical. Then again, like if they're willing to shell out money for Bob Myers, who knows? Any other thoughts on the Tommy Balcetis news or this whole GM
just more
saga?
Everything that happens leads to more questions, and we just want the answer to the biggest question already.
Which is what the hell is going on? I think the amount of time it's going to be so annoying when they finally announce the GM and then we just get like a 20-minute press conference when we've had like questions building about this for months. Like I have questions about the process that I'd like to ask Josh, like what the hell is going on, and maybe he'll answer some of those. But then it's like, okay, now we have to actually talk to the GM about like, okay, how do you like what do you see in this team? Like, what's your approach going to be? This, that, and the other. I don't know. Whether it's Ben or somebody new. anyway, and or somebody new, because we might be getting multiple new things going on here. All right, let's move on to our first big segment of the show, which is crazy because we are 45 minutes in almost. We got the Desmond Bane trade, where this was news on Monday morning. Was it Monday or Sunday?
I don't remember.
It might have been the day of the end of an NBA Finals game, so maybe Sunday. But the Memphis Grizzlies traded Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic for KCP, Cole Anthony, and 4 first-round picks and a pick swap, which was, in my opinion, a lot. We don't have to get into the actual identity of the picks, but the one for this season, just in terms of immediate applicability here, relevance. Orlando traded their 2025 first round pick in addition to their 2026 pick, and the reason they could trade subsequent years is that they had 2 in 2025, so they get around the Stepien rule. They have their second pick, which is Denver's 2025 pick from the Aaron Gordon trade. So in some small way, we helped make this happen. Denver helped make this happen. Fluent and Chill says we could have traded KCP. We can talk about that a little bit. I do think that one of the reasons that there's so many first round picks included in this deal is either one of the first round picks or the pick swap was included to get off of the KCP deal. I don't think that it was more than that, because KCP only has 2 years left on his contract. It's like, even if you don't think he was worth the money that he made this year, after next season, he's going to be an expiring contract, which is like, that's basically just a neutral value deal for a player like KCP that, even if he's not going to be great, like, he can play, especially in a rising cap environment. But yeah, what was your first reaction to seeing this news? Because I think a lot of people saw it before me because I was sleeping in.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting trade just because of the amount of picks that were given. And I think that was everyone's immediate reaction was, if Bane is getting that return, that many first round picks, what is someone like KD or Giannis going to get? And I do think a lot of that speculation is overblown because each trade is its own. Like, yes, there is a little bit of a market, but it's mostly about like what teams have to offer, the need that they have for that specific player, how much they have to actually give up and trade. It does affect some things, but I think like you can't just go into every negotiation as a GM now and say, well, Desmond Bane got 4 first round picks, so we want 7 for Giannis. It's like, no team's going to take you seriously at that point. The KCP contract was super interesting. I do agree that they probably had to include an extra pick to get off of it, which is funny that that's the language that we're using for that now, since we'd been missing KCP as a piece and for his skill set. And the dollar amount that he's getting is not going to be as much as the salary cap increases from year to year. And he's still going to provide something to a team. But I don't think he necessarily...
I feel like Orlando was just like anxious to get this deal done, honestly.
Yeah, that too. It's like whatever it takes to get the deal done.
The thing is, I'm going to include some information from Jeff Weltman, who is the president of basketball operations for the Orlando Magic. It's actually been really nice to have somebody out and visible to talk about what the direction is of the team, as he talked about in his exit interviews, but in his press conference that he did following this trade, he talked about the fact that they didn't even know that Desmond Bane was available for trade. And I agreed with that. I'm not shocked that Memphis traded him, but it is like, okay, that's surprising because it wasn't like rumored that they were shopping him, for example. But Orlando was very aggressive in going after him. They were like, we want to get in on this before we're in like a bidding war, for example. And I think that Bane is the kind of player that would invite a bidding war just because he's pretty versatile and can fit on a lot of different teams. Like, he doesn't just fill, it's not like he needs a particular kind of team around him. Like, one, he's a shooter, so he's going to fit anywhere. 2, he has a bit of shot creation himself, although, we can talk about whether he is all the things that Orlando needs or not. But Yeah, so I think Jeff Weltman basically was like, "Oh, he's like on a short list of players that we knew if he ever became available, we wanted to jump on that," and they did. And they might have overpaid by like a pick to do so,
Hmm.
even
Yeah,
with the trying to get off the KCP deal at the same time. Because again, it's really like, okay, it's only like a negative ish asset for 1 year, and then it's an expiry after that.
yeah.
So
Yeah, it's not horrible, but I just find it interesting, like the narratives around KCP with the idea that the Nuggets let him walk and how that's all shaping out. And there's multiple sides to looking at that. Mike Weisberg says, as a Celtics fan, the thing that sticks out is Orlando's going for it. They're going to get expensive quickly. And Fluent and Chill talks about how they're already super young and having that many picks may be useless. Therefore, they just went for a player like Bane. So I've heard similar sentiments to these two comments where they're not likely to draft a player as good as Bane potentially, and I get that argument. But that's less picks you can use. You brought up to me that that's the all-in move, and now they don't have as many picks to go trade for someone else. Even though I really like Bane a lot for them, and I don't think KCP fit as well as Bane, of course. So using that money to get him, I think, is a good move.
all right, it's
Um,
effectively an upgrade on KCP,
yeah,
and obviously they also trade Cole Anthony, who's their backup point guard
yeah,
in on that team
yeah.
for one guard. So they're like, we are getting all the guards off our team. And Bane is a guard. He's more like a bigger wing. He's pretty stout and that kind of thing. They have like this thing against point guards in that front office, which I'll talk a little bit about.
Yeah, but just overall with the trade, there were people who were like really harsh on Orlando for how much they gave up. Like NBA Chicken, friend of the show, gave them an F and was very upset about moving all these picks. I think where I ended up is it's good for both teams. They both gave up something they didn't really want to give up, like maybe too many picks. I don't think Memphis really wanted to give up Bane, although there's all these rumors about now they're going to be possibly tearing it down and Ja could be on the way out, etc. But who really wants to get rid of a player as good as Bane unless it really gets you something great in return? They kind of couldn't
Well,
say
that's
no
the
to
thing is
this.
like I don't know that Memphis was looking to shop Bane, but once Orlando found out he was available, I mean, I've heard a lot of Memphis fans describe this was a Godfather offer. Like Orlando was like, we're
Yeah.
willing to overpay to get this guy.
Hmm.
And I don't think they overpaid by that much. It's enough that I want to comment on it because I like
Yeah.
you said that I'd mentioned to you before. It's like okay, it's an opportunity cost. I don't care about making those pick selections, but it's like that's one more first round pick that you don't have to make an upgrade for a utility player at a different roster spot, for example, to help build out the rest of your team, which is really annoying to me. But especially if I don't necessarily think that Bane is all like it's like this is your all-in move. Like he has to be able to fix 90% of your problems. I don't know that he necessarily does that, but he does make the team better, right?
Hmm.
And they agree with that. Like he's on their short list of guys they wanted to jump on if they ever
Yeah.
did become available. So, and
He's
they
gonna fit their timeline so much more, and I like that they are getting more aggressive. Like I think all young teams like this should be going for it as soon as possible. Like I think the Thunder are kind of showing that in some degree. So teams are moving on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just a little bit of the backdrop again from the Orlando perspective on this. I am an Orlando Magic fan, so I actually watched the front office's exit interviews at the end of the season after they got eliminated from Boston. Um, Jeff Weltman, again, the president of basketball operations, basically had three major points here, which was they're going to be in win now mode now as they move into a phase where they're like, okay, Paolo and Franz are like good enough that it's time to like move our chips into the in the middle of the table here. Uh, they want they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of defense for some offense now. So I was like, they're finally gonna get a point guard. They didn't do that. uh,
But maybe soon.
yeah. He said they wanted, quote, proven shot making, which I think is interesting because I think, just one thing about Desmond Bane is that he's maintained 58 to 60% true shooting in every single regular season of his career, including as a rookie, which is super impressive because rookies just aren't efficient, off the bench or not. Like that's especially like Memphis, they weren't really a good offense until like a couple years into like Ja's tenure, which I guess at that point Ja had been there for a couple of years. So sure. Uh, but he struggled in the playoffs, especially recently, uh, which is tough. So I thought the proven shot making was interesting because I thought Waltman was talking more in like a playoff context. And look, the Grizzlies, I think, are a fake good offense. Like you get them to the playoffs and it's like, oh, this is terrible. We don't know what's going on here. And so maybe that wasn't the best situation for Desmond. I don't know that Orlando is going to be a whole lot better, especially in a playoff context. Like, I think he is going to improve their regular season offense, but playoff wise, I don't know that he necessarily solves the issues that I saw with that team. Jeff Altman also talked about the need for better playmaking because he's like, I don't know why we were such a bad shooting team this year. Part of it is the shot making, but I think part of it is the needing better playmaking to
to
create
get it to
better
better shots.
quality shots, right? And he did a lot to sort of make the excuse for KCP and everybody else on the roster just having like the one of the worst shooting seasons in NBA history. If you could bring up the shooting graphic for the Orlando Magic, well, uh, so this was one created by Todd Whitehead at Crumpled Jumper on Twitter. And if you see here in the bottom right-hand corner, this was the Orlando Magic 2025 three-point shooting season. And if you like every sort of column is another season and where each team stood, and they were the worst shooting team in the last decade. It wasn't close either.
Yeah. And for the listeners only, they are very all the way below all the other teams.
They're about point and a half off the Wizards in terms of compared to league average this season, and about a point below any other team of the last decade in terms of average 3-point percentage, which honestly it felt even worse than that watching it as a fan. But that's something that Bane can definitely help them with. One of the I talked about the like, okay, they didn't get a point guard. They didn't really improve their playmaking, although Bane can do some of that in like a secondary fashion. But Philip Rossman-Reich from Locked On Magic called it a quote doubling down on their philosophy, which is no point guard / Jalen Suggs will become a good enough point guard. We're going all in on wing ball. They didn't go after Anthony Simons, who's not really a point guard, but small guard, like
he would be good,
relatively reliable shot creator. I would have loved like Mike Conley on this team, although like a couple years ago would have been better. Like
yeah,
he's had a rough like season and a half ish, I would say. At his age, but I still would have liked a player like that if they were going to go for a smaller move. And he's like, "Oh, we're willing to give up a little bit of defense for offense." But they're not really giving anything up on defense because Bane is really good, and he's not as good defensively as KCP, but as good of a perimeter defender as KCP is, on a team like the Orlando Magic, you're getting diminishing marginal returns there, which is why that move never made any sense to me last year when they went to sign KCP. It was like, I guess this is just salary that they could use in a trade because KCP was incredibly redundant on that roster. They have all these defensive wings on there. They were like, he'll improve our 3-point shooting. But I'm like, even if KCP had a good shooting year in terms of efficiency, he's not a high volume 3-point shooter. So he wasn't going to improve it that much.
And he's like a good mid-range shooter too, but
yeah,
I don't think they utilize, or why would they want to utilize that?
Right. On that team where everything inside of the arc is so cramped, like he was just spacing beyond the arc. And honestly, that's fine. I think he was fine in that role. I think they could have given up a little bit more defensively to get a real point guard, and I don't have any problem with Bane. I think if they had figured out a way to get they would have had to pry Mike Conley away from the Wolves. And Desmond Bane, I'm like, okay, now we're cooking because Now they have a veteran point guard who, even when he's not on the floor, is going to be able to help these guys learn how to do point guard things. They have not had a veteran point guard on this roster with this core, which is like a big gripe of mine when it comes to the development of both Paolo and Franz as playmakers and game managers.
They could try the Russ Westbrook experiment.
No. Are you crazy? No. Um okay, let's see here. Okay, I do want to give some more to, what Bane has done. I have a little interesting stat for you here, Will. Okay. They do get a shooter in Bane who can also create a bit and score off the dribble. Like he's more versatile than just being like a catch and shoot guy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten the, max extension that he got. Desmond Bane is one of 7 players. This is from Fast Break Breakfast, who's big Memphis Grizzlies fan. He's one of 7 players over the last 3 years to average 20 points and 5 assists on over 39% from 3. Can you guess 3 of the other 6? And then I'll give you the other 3.
Wait, it's so 3 of the 6 of
the other 6 players to average 20 points and 5 assists is over the last 3 seasons on over 39% from 3.
Oh man.
You could probably guess 2 pretty
Steph.
Okay, that's the obvious one.
And Jason Tatum?
No.
No. He shoots a lot of
I'll
threes.
give you 4 guesses to guess 3 of them. So that's your strike.
Who's another 20-point high 3-point shooter? Jokic.
Jokic is one of the other 6, yes.
Damn, I'm running out of other players.
You could just guess point guards or something that are good shooters. He's not a point guard.
Well, he plays like a point guard. Luka, he plays like a point guard too. But is Luka?
No.
Damn it. I don't know. Lillard?
No. Okay, so Jokic and Steph, Jalen Brunson, Kyrie. Actually, I didn't realize he was averaging over 5 assists.
We had a viewer guess Kyrie correct.
Good job, Fluid and Chill. Darius Garland, who has been a good 3-point shooter for a while, and he's getting the assists. I guess over 20 points makes sense. The last one is Jamal Murray.
Oh damn! I should have done it. Should have gone for Jamal. I know he's like the 20 points is what got me on Jamal because I know
Jamal's averaged over 20 the last 3 seasons.
I guess that's true.
Yeah,
it's just he goes on stretches where he doesn't average 20. So then I'm
right within the season, but he always finishes around 21 by the end of the year. Yeah. So that was interesting, and Desmond Bane falls in that company, which is pretty good company, right? The fact that he's getting the assists in there, even in a Memphis Grizzlies offense that is kind of like, I don't know how much passing there is in a given. They've changed their offensive philosophy just as a team and how they play so many times over the last couple of years that's another, part of it. I think part of what's boosting those numbers is the year that they had without Ja, where he only played a few games because he was suspended and then he was injured. And Desmond Bane had to just be the primary playmaker, and it was like, oh god, this is a disaster. Even though he gets to work out that muscle a bit more. So if you're Orlando, you're thinking, what? We're not getting like a primary playmaker. We're not getting somebody that's going to create like super high quality shots for their guys, but we know we're getting like a decent playmaker who can make like connective passes, who's unselfish, all the good stuff that you want out of your players. And I think otherwise he's going to be a pretty good fit in Orlando. Couple of notes I have about what this means for Orlando's future. They're about to get incredibly expensive at the top. Now, I've said on this show that one of the things I want to do, I think I've said on the show, one of the things I want to do is start talking about salaries more in terms of percentage of the cap, because the numbers are going to start fluctuating so wildly as the salary cap goes up and up and up over the next few years with the new media deal. So I want to give you guys some reference about what this is going to mean for Orlando salary cap here. So Desmond Bane signed his rookie scale max extension that kicked in, I think this past season. Paolo's incoming max extension, plus Jalen Suggs, who just signed his rookie max extension that kicks in next year. Paolo's isn't going to kick in until the year after that. And Franz's is also kicking in next year because he was in Jalen Suggs' draft class, right? So when you're projecting to not next season, but the 26-27 year, if Paolo does not make All NBA and get the extra bump in his rookie scale max extension, those 4 guys are going to be making 92% of the cap of the salary cap, which obviously in the NBA we have a soft cap, which means you can go over the salary cap, but then you run into luxury tax and the first apron, the second apron, all that stuff. But most of your money is going to be going to those 4 guys, like vast majority of it. For reference, Denver's top 4 are projected to be making 105% of the cap next year. And that's before AG's bigger extension number kicks in the year after that.
Mm-hmm. And then CB, you're not including CB.
Not including Christian in that, no. And that's just the top 4. And that's because Jokic is on the Supermax and Jamal's on the Veteran Max. All of Orlando's guys are on max contracts, but they're rookie scale max contracts, which means they're a slightly smaller percent of the cap than the Veteran Max and Supermax contracts, which is why I really try to differentiate when people are talking about max contracts. Kevin Durant's is not the same as MPJ's. Kevin Durant makes like $20 million more because he's on a Veteran Supermax contract as opposed to MPJ that is on his rookie scale max extension, and also signed at different times. So not all maxes are created equal, just FYI. So my thing is that I don't think that Desmond Bane solves all their offensive issues, and those problems are going to continue to be evident over the next couple of years, right? So if and when this doesn't work out in terms of fully gelling and solving those problems to the point that they are a viable playoff offense, which I'm not sure they still are, although I think they could win around. This move indicates to me that they are more willing to put Jalen Suggs on the chopping block after next season. In particular, because they have Desmond Bane. So they go after Bane, and you kind of make the decision that either Jalen Suggs is going to turn into this incredible starting caliber point guard. He doesn't have to be, Steph Curry. He doesn't have to be, even Trae Young is a playmaker or anything like that. But as your sort of primary on-ball initiator, not creator, because that's still going to be Franz and Paolo, I think that there's different aspects to the role of the on-ball guys that I've tried to differentiate as we talked about this season for the Denver Nuggets, for example. What's the difference between Russ and Jamal, and when Jokic is on ball and when AG is on ball, and all that kind of thing. So either Suggs will be the point guard that they need him to be, or he won't. And Orlando's not going to need a million shooting guards, which they currently have. They just have, because they haven't, everyone talks about how many bigs they have because they have Wendell Carter Jr., they have Goga Patase, they have Mo Wagner, and Jonathan Isaac, who's not a center, but he's a big, all these that's only 4 guys. They actually have a ton of money and roster spots invested in wing positions because they don't have any point guards, right? One of the things I noted about this deal is that they, to get Desmond Bane, didn't give up any of Tristan Da Silva, Anthony Black, Caleb Houston, or Gary Harris, who has a team option that they ended up declining as part of this deal, but he might be back in Orlando, maybe on a minimum. I don't know. And they're in rumors to go after Nickeil Alexander-Walker after this. So I just feel like their defensive shooting guard room that can do a little bit on offense, but not everything. And Jalen Suggs is the best of all these guys, but they need him to be a point guard, and they're going to have more money invested in Desmond Bane. So I just feel like he's going to be the one on the chopping block when this doesn't work out.
That's interesting, as somebody who some Nuggets fans are interested in trying to acquire him through some possible trade. It seems unlikely, but yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
said
they're not
also,
going to trade him now, and I think they
yeah.
like Jalen Suggs a lot, but this is sort of like, I don't know how far in the future they thought about this move again, like after hearing Jeff Waltman's comments about how they were like, well, we just jumped on this as soon as we found out that like he could be
Hmm.
available. But it is the sort of logical conclusion if you're looking at where they would want to shed some money and try to create some more flexibility to try to make the roster make a little bit more sense down the line.
Yeah. I did think it was interesting that Cole Anthony was in the deal too because they're already so short on point guards. But I do like Anthony Black a lot. They do need some vet. I wonder what they're gonna do. Gary Harris is not the kind of point guard. Obviously, he's a shooting guard, but it's another defensive shooting guard. I like the wing ball thing, like as I call it, clone ball. And but you do need someone to initiate. I mean, the Celtics and the
Like
Thunder do it.
The Celtics have Derek White who can
Yeah,
be this like low mistake. Like he's kind of like the best non all-star starting point guard you can have,
right.
right? In terms of
Or
like
Jamal,
I just
non
all
All
right.
Star.
Well, non all-star caliber starting point guard that you can have, and maybe Celtics fans would take credit for that too. I don't know if Mike White has thoughts on that. Where he's not a creator, but he can run basic actions, be low mistake, play off ball, and get out of the way. Like do all the things that you want besides be the guy. He does all the other point guard things,
Yeah, there
right?
are teams who like I do. I think that the Thunder also like they have SGA, but he's not like a pure point guard type of player. I think he
Right. And look
plays
at
more
their
like a shooting
offense.
guard. Yeah,
They have to be a generational defense for that offense to make sense, is the thing.
yeah. So it can work, but you're gonna be like having pain points in other areas. So I'll be interested to see
Yeah.
how they fill that out. And I do think Bane is a perfect fit. Fent Jones brought this up. But I think it's just like he can't do everything.
I think
So,
Desmond Bane
but
is going to fit perfectly in Orlando. I don't think
yeah,
he's going to have any problems because I think that he fits probably on any team, right? He's one
yes,
of those players that is just like he's gonna figure out how to contribute. And he can do so many like a little bit of every, but he's not going to solve all their problems, is what I'm saying,
yeah,
right? Like I think Orlando's offense has other. Now here's the thing. Ultimately, it's up to Franz and Paolo to be good enough to make this work, and they are still very young. Well, yeah. What if Franz and Paolo don't work together? That's another thing. It might be like, oh no, we're keeping Suggs and Bane, and we've just decided the Franz and Paolo experiment doesn't work, and then we split those up. We've seen. I just feel like Orlando is a very conservative organization, and they probably look at how the Tatum Brown experiment went in Boston. They're like, nope, just give these guys enough time. They're going to figure out how to play off of each other. And I still don't think those guys play off of each other. All you had to do was give them generational spacing, and they finally made it work and won a title. But they clearly like want to make things work with both of those guys. It seems like they really appreciate how both are invested in the organization, all that stuff. And then, like, if you wanted to move one or the other,
yeah,
then you run into the question of like, well, what kind of star do I want to put next to either of these guys?
yeah.
And yeah, and do you even get the opportunity to do that? Like that guy isn't always even available.
Yeah, initially I kind of thought Franz might be the one on the chopping block because you don't want to be too top heavy, it seems, in today's NBA. And teams are shifting away from that. And I thought maybe he would be a guy you could move to then build out around Paolo and all that. And then you have the defense with Suggs. But I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense that Suggs could be the one because they have the clear need at that position to
Yeah.
do the things that they need. And if it's not
Right.
Suggs, then it's kind of like, what are you doing? So
It's kind of like, well, if they're like, look, we're paying all this money and we're willing to keep paying all this money, but like, what if we traded Jalen Suggs for Derek White? Like, I think Boston would do that now because they're like, okay, we get younger.
They are
He
similar, but
does
he's got a
it,
little
but then it's
more
like,
what they
well, what
need.
if Jalen Suggs just becomes Derek White, and then we just have younger Derek White? Like, we don't want to give that up either. And that's what I think their like logic is right now, which is why they're not making any major moves. In addition to the fact that Jalen Suggs was injured middle of this year, missed the playoffs. We don't know like how, and he looked like he was getting better before that. So we're gonna see. Like they are betting a lot on development of their best guys. Like they're not like, okay, like we need Anthony Black to be like a normal NBA player. Anthony Black had a way better playoffs than he did regular season, by the way. Like he was like the bane of my existence, no pun intended, in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, I was just like, okay, this dude's a gamer. Like, let's go. As an Orlando Magic fan myself. But they're betting on the development of their best guys to be better and make this team work, which is a little bit of a different proposition. But they also have
Instead
to
of
figure out
betting
how to make
on
it
your
fit
worst
work.
players to develop.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would do that. Okay, couple other things here. Matt Moore has a piece on his HP basketball Substack. You guys should all check that out. The name of that piece was How Orlando Split the Gap. Basically talks about how Paolo has apparently been, quote, frustrated with the Orlando Magic offense. And like you might think, look, he's part of the reason that like the offense hasn't been that good. Like his shooting is like this, that, or the other. But a lot of times he's kicking out the guys that are just bricking. But his turnovers are really more of my issue, and the shot selection, which was starting to get better this year before his abdominal injury, the abdominal strain that both he and Franz both had at different points of the season, or it was an oblique strain, right? He is getting better. I agree, Fent Jones. He is getting better about the shot selection and the turnovers, but I think it was still an issue in the playoffs this year. But he showed last year in the playoffs, like, he can be that guy, but you need to have a resilient enough offense to withstand the other team's adjustments. And Bane helps with some of that, but it's not, I don't think, enough to like solve things. So I think some of these issues are still going to come up. But Paolo has been reportedly frustrated with the offense. He is extension eligible this summer. Now, I'm not saying that Paolo would have like threatened to like not sign his extension this year or anything like that. But like the fact of the matter is you want to keep your superstar happy, especially one that is going to be loyal to your organization, right? You don't only want to like quote unquote cave to demands once they turn into ultimatums. You want to like, okay, like let's keep a dialogue open. Like let's do right by our guy, right? I do think that Orlando could have gone and probably would have if Bane wasn't available. If Memphis was like, he's not, uh, we're not trading him. They could have gone for a smaller margin move that still netted a non-trivial improvement in the offense. Like I've wanted them to go after Malik Monk for the last couple of years, or a lot of people have talked about Norm Powell, who's about to be on an expiring contract with the Clippers, and who knows if they want to
That'd
pay
be
him.
good.
Or even CJ McCollum, who is a basketball terrorist, to be very clear, but he's a good playoff performer. He's been one of maybe their most reliable player, the Pelicans' most reliable player over the last few years, and we know that he can kill a team single-handedly in the playoffs. And he would improve their three-point shooting and their three-point volume just by virtue of like how many shots he creates there. But I think Orlando was also trying to show Paolo their commitment to a meaningful improvement. And I think those other guys would have been meaningful improvement, probably not as much as Desmond Bane, but just in different ways. But I think they wanted to make this bigger splash to be like, look, like we're going to make this better. And I think that the fact that Paolo's extension eligible also colored the tone of Jeff Weltman's exit interview, where he's like, look, we're in win now mode. Like these guys are ready to have that pressure of expectations put on them. And there aren't many bigger moves that Orlando could have gone for than Desmond Bane, whether you agree about like the fit or whether it solves all of their problems. Bane is like the biggest possible move for them that like would have been on the market in terms of like shot creation and shot making, right?
Yeah, that's definitely going to improve Paolo's spirits because of all that he can do and bring to the team and not be breaking shots. and
Yeah.
playing defense. He just brings everything. He's like, I'm gonna enjoy watching him so much more on the Magic than on Memphis, where it was like bothering me how good he was, and how much he could do and how versatile he is as someone who a lot of teams passed up in the draft. And, just being on Memphis and in the West, it's so annoying. But I'm very happy he's on the Magic. Can't wait to see how it looks.
Yeah. He already picked up his uniform. He's looking good in the pinstripes. He's got that $1 million smile. I think he's going to be a great Orlando Magic. Everyone talked about how he's got this great reputation as a great locker room and culture guy on top of all that hard work or all the things you want to hear about a player you just traded 4 first round picks for. I don't think he's going to fix everything, but I do think that Orlando is going to be better next year. And look, the East is wide open. Like, you can't look at how Boston was about to go out this year, and even before the Tatum injury, was set to be making some pretty big changes this summer as they sort of soft tear it down to get under the second apron. But then obviously Jason Tatum does get injured, and now you're looking at like the best team in the East probably is out of the picture now. He did roast the Memphis practice facility. I think he called it the dungeon. The Magic practice facilities are so beautiful too. I'm like, this is very different than the videos I'm seeing of the practices coming out of Denver. Let's see. Okay, the last thing I want to say about the expectations. He is an upgrade on KCP. I don't know what they're going to do at backup point guard now. They're going to figure out something. I don't know if they see Nickeil Alexander-Walker as a potential guy that they could go after for that position. I was thinking about this earlier, how Nickeil, we've talked about on this show how his role has changed this year or been reduced to varying degrees depending on the stretch of the season because of Donte DiVincenzo's arrival to Minnesota. Minnesota can still offer him like a good amount of money depending on what they do this summer, and they are trying to get under the second apron and all that. But I doubt they want to let somebody walk for nothing. But my thing is that if DiVincenzo is staying in Minnesota in any case, whether they're going to trade for KD, not trade Donte for other things that they want to make the roster better, whatever, I feel like Nickeil for the same money would go somewhere where he knows he's going to get a bigger role, because he can make even more money or just like play more and like all that stuff, right? What do you think about that? Or do you think he just like maybe loves Minnesota so much that if they could offer him the same money? I don't think they can though, because even if they got into the second apron, they can only offer him the taxpayer MLE. So I feel like if Orlando could offer the full MLE somehow, although it's tough now because of how much money they're spending on this roster, I think they could get there.
I like DiVincenzo on the Magic.
No, I'm talking about Nickeil.
Oh, Nickeil. But I like DiVincenzo.
Because he's going to be a free agent. Well, they'd have to trade for DiVincenzo.
I think a lot of teams want Nickeil. They have so much defense as it is, and I think Nas.
Well, that's the thing is like this team refuses to get a point guard. They're just like, who's somebody else that isn't a point guard that is like a wing that like kind of handles the ball, and then we don't get a point guard. It's like so infuriating.
Yeah. I'd rather just go get like a pure archetype point guard rather than Nickeil. Nickeil's kind of like another. I know he is a point guard, but he just feels like a wing defender in a lot of ways too. And he's kind of inconsistent offensively, and the Magic have that in spades. So,
yeah, they have plenty of inconsistent offensive players.
Yeah,
like I kind of feel bad for Desmond Bane because it's like roughest situation as Memphis must have been offensively. It's just a different beast when you're talking about so many young players that are still trying to find their game and like all this stuff. So I hope he has a good time. Like it's going to be a good like culture fit for Desmond, but he's going to have his work cut out for him in terms of like, how do I help turn this offense around? But Orlando gets credit for doing something. They went big. Hopefully they didn't spend too much money or too many assets and resources. I just have one note here on the implications for Memphis. They're they realize that they're not close in the context of the Western Conference. Like, if it would be such a different story if Memphis were in the East, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so different. They have plenty. That's a team that you're like, that's a team that could make the Eastern Conference Finals or even make the finals. Although I'm more skeptical of that because of not trusting their
Mm-hmm.
offense and
Watch
Ja.
them retool though, and then or tear down and then get moved east with expansion.
Oh yeah.
And then it's like you could
Ugh,
have
I want
been.
it to be Minnesota.
I don't think it's gonna be then.
Yeah, I think isn't Minnesota the furthest east though, or is it
I
Memphis? I
still
think
think
it's
it's
really close.
Memphis.
It's Memphis. Uh, so they figure they need to be flexible, which is why they move Bane. Obviously they take back some contracts in Cole Anthony and KCP, but like I said, KCP has fewer years left on his deal. And next year, like after next season, he's going to be expiring, so it'll be pretty easy for them to move off of in an upgrade at a different position even. So now they're going to retool around Ja and Jaren, and Jaren is actually extension eligible this summer. He still has one more year left on his deal, so if they don't get a deal done, it's not the end of the world. But he is extension eligible. He did not win DPOY, and he did not make All NBA, so he is not super max eligible, which kind of helps Memphis out a bit in that sense. But it seems like this was in part a move because I just don't think you're going to trade Bane if you're getting rid of Jaren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like they traded Bane, to make room for the extension.
Yeah.
Like, to be
I agree.
honest. And that was like a big worry for a lot of Memphis fans for the entire season is how are they going to get this? And if he makes, and they wanted him to make All NBA to make it so they could do the extension that they could do and keep him. And and I like JJJ and I wouldn't give him up. So, but if they're like completely tearing down, which I didn't expect to hear, I know people have been talking about that and the fact, they
Yeah,
got swept by the
I
Thunder,
think that
but
that's been swiftly rebuffed by a lot of the people, like reporters out of Memphis that actually follow the team. Is like they're like, no, this is more like a soft retool. I don't think Jaw's going anywhere.
I think Ja still
Honestly,
needs
because
another
if you're planning
season.
on moving Jaw, you definitely don't move Bane because you're like, why would we move like the guy who is like the most versatile, like you said, like you get 4 first-round picks out of this guy. So maybe they are
I
selling
know.
high on him, but also it's like he'll be able to work with whatever direction we end up going next if we were to move Jaw. So I don't think that they're moving Jaw, and I don't think they're moving Jaren.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think it's going to take definitely not Jaren. Ja is a little bit more on the fence for me. I think they're going to try to give it another season before they would move
I'm not
him.
saying they shouldn't move Jaw.
Yeah,
I'm
there's
just
definitely
saying
a
that this
case to
move
move
indicates
him.
that they probably are not going to.
Yeah, unless they could get another offer. Well, I guess another offer they can't refuse.
For John Moran?
Yeah,
Well, I guess.
but
Brooklyn?
I don't know a
Brooklyn wants a
team.
star, right?
I feel like a team. It's kind of risky to go after Ja and like give the house for him if you're another team, unless you're just like wanting to sell a
Right.
jerseys team.
Right. The reason you go at it's not that Bane is like more valuable than Jaw, right? Like Jaw is like the engine of an offense. That's different. But he has a lot of baggage, off-court baggage that you have to deal with. He's got the injury history, which is in large part due to his play style. It's like this guy every other year is missing 30 plus games due to a shoulder injury from a dunk. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. How it seemed like this year he was trying to dunk less because he keeps getting like shoulder injuries from these dunks, and then of course in the playoffs he gets a shoulder injury and a dunk when he kind of gets undercut. It's just like, ugh. Not his fault, but it's like that's how he plays, so like that risk is always there. So that's tough too. So it'd be like a team that was like rebuilding and just like we're not getting anywhere with just the draft, and Jaw is better than anybody we're gonna get from like, picks like 5 through 15. So we should just go for it. That's why I could see Brooklyn being like the kind of team that goes for him. That would be like a terrible fit, but like apparently they, you know,
Yeah, I could see that.
they want to star. All right, well, let's move on to the NBA finals. Very, very fun stuff. OKC goes up 3-2 after game 5. What are your just like general impressions of games 4 and 5? And I mean, it has to be about like how OKC in particular has looked, but um, general takeaways.
I hate to say it, but they just, like I said to you, they just respond well every single time. I said to you that I wish that they could just have their lie down game and just, just
Like a
miss
bad
some
game.
shots. Just a horrible game where the Pacers could just solidly blow the game out, take one game. I just needed one more game to happen. A
I
lot of
just
these
think
games that they've won
yeah.
have been close, but
Yeah,
yeah, you said the letdown game was game 3 that
that's
the
right.
Pacers won, even though it
And we
was like,
talked about it on this show. We were like, going back through the film, like this was actually like subpar defense,
yeah, and it,
which is like bad defense for like an average team, let alone for for OKC.
yeah, and it sucks that a lot of our concerns from watching that game did come to fruition in some senses, where I felt like they did leave a lot on the table with like effort and just
Yeah.
bad coverages, lazy defense, and they could play so much better, and they have been. Even though I think game 4 was closer, and the Pacers
It
just
was, but
couldn't pull it out.
I could tell in game 4 that it was if OKC was going to lose game 4, it wasn't going to be an effort thing. Like they were from the jump like all over Indiana, and Indiana was just making everything.
Yeah,
Right. So
which can
let's
happen.
talk about game 4. So OKC wins that 111-104. Indiana led most of the way, but they couldn't pull away, especially in that third quarter. Like that was the point where you're like, okay, if Miles Turner could like make some threes, he's like wide open, pick and pop threes that he's just missing all playoffs. But they couldn't pull away. It was kind of the reverse of game 1. Which was, OKC like pulling away or not pulling away, but leading most of the way. And then not be like Indiana kept like just kind of staying in it. And you're just like, okay, this is still a game. Like, I'm not going to turn off the TV yet. But it felt like one team was in control most of the way, but they just couldn't, blow it out. I thought there was like game 4 was like one of the worst officiated games I've ever seen for the first 2/3 of it, where it was very one-sided. I never talk about officiating, but I felt the need to in this one. It was really bad. Where Indiana was this is like kind of crazy because Indiana was leading most of the way, despite issues where they were not getting calls. OKC was getting calls, and that kind of like let OKC stay in the game.
Hmm.
But then when it comes to the final phase of the game, and I think really like midway through the third quarter is where I like kind of segment this off. I thought it was pretty even for both teams. Like there were both teams getting some questionable calls. Um but obviously like both teams kind of also getting away. It was weird. It was very uneven where it's like sometimes you're getting both teams getting questionable calls, other times uh uh like whoa, that's a lot of physicality that was allowed there. Basically that dude just got clobbered. But it was relatively even, at least for both teams in that last third of the game. But it was OKC just making all the big plays
Hmm.
in not just in the clutch, but in the entire fourth quarter. Like that was a fourth quarter. As much as I want to say OKC took it, and I want to give them credit for that because there's some things that they did that we'll talk about. That was a collapse by Indiana in that game 4, where I was just like, oh, there were like a lot of like, forget about missing shots. There was so much that Indiana had within their control that they didn't do.
Yeah,
That was it just made it like a really bad quarter.
and I get Halliburton has been a clutch god this playoffs and just hitting game winners in every series. But I felt like they were just throwing in the ball and not really doing much and just saying like, okay, you have to save us this time, like take us home. And there just wasn't much flow to the offense. And I just didn't love that. And they just
Part of the
looked
reason
tight
for
at
that
the
is that they
end.
weren't getting anything in transition or semi-transition because they couldn't grab a goddamn rebound.
Yeah, or gonna stop or anything.
Like they were OKC was this was a bad offensive game for OKC. This is a bad offensive game for Shea. Like this is one of his worst games of the entire playoffs, in my opinion. And then just a few key plays in that fourth quarter, and it's like turn the whole game around. And the reason was that like some. I think they had over 20 points in that quarter, but a lot of it was like offensive rebound putbacks. Chet murdered the
Oh,
Pacers with
yeah.
those offensive rebounds in that fourth quarter.
So
OKC
bad.
had 8 second chance points on 4 offensive rebounds. And I'm like, if you just don't allow 2 of those, this is still a 1 possession game, and maybe the Pacers are even up in the last 30 seconds, let
Yep.
alone giving up 4 of them. And I have to get on Miles Turner for this one because Miles Turner had 2 rebounds in 30 minutes of play in that game.
He's been bad these last 2 games, especially defensively.
And only one of them was a defensive rebound. He's averaging fewer rebounds per game in this series than Obi Toppin, who's coming off the bench and is Obi Toppin.
Mm-hmm.
And I already alluded to the fact that he's not making his threes, which is like, that would be kind of gravy. Like if Miles was making his threes, like I think they win game 4 and I think they stay in game 5, but he wasn't, right? But yeah, like it was just a really ugly execution fourth quarter for Indiana. And we keep coming back to that word execution that David Adelman loves so much.
It was awful all the way around. They went in, I'm pretty sure they went into the fourth quarter with a lead and, of course, lost the game. And I'm glad you brought up the officiating. That was a Scott Foster game. A lot of fans are criticizing him specifically, which Carlisle called out, which I thought was more a message to the team than anything. But
that's a good point. I was actually thinking that he was trying to work it in case Scott Foster was a ref in another game. We'll see if we even get to another game in this series, but
yeah, there was that one play. I don't know if you have the clip included, but where he extends his arm, push off, makes the shot. They don't call it, and it's like, yeah, they already don't call that call a lot.
I saw that play, and I didn't think that it was like it was a push off, but it's like not one of the egregious SGA push offs that like they have to call, which they call so rarely. But it was it looks super egregious because he has that change of pace that like it looks like he pushed Nesmith that far. But part of the reason that Nesmith like goes back that far is because if there's a little bit of push off, but in addition to that, he's thrown completely off balance with how far SGA leans before he steps back, which is like his shiftiness.
My thing was just that his arm was fully extended on that one.
Well, yeah, but it because Nesmith goes that far back because he's like on his heels, like your arm is going to go as far, like it's going to create as much space as between you and the other guy if you're leaning that far.
Like, yeah, but I don't. My thing is you don't have to actually push them that far for it to be a push off. It's just the fact that
I agree with that, but it's one of those where I'm like, I'm not surprised that they didn't call it.
Gotcha. I'm just not surprised that they didn't call it because it's Scott Foster and because they're not going to call something like that in a big moment in the finals where they try to let plays go at the end of the game, which I get it, but because if you rob OKC of that game and you call that, fans can say, well, he does that 90% of the time and doesn't get the call, but on this one he did. That's why they just got to I don't know, the reffing's so frustrating. And I had just been saying that this series has been really interesting as somebody who doesn't care about the Thunder and despises them. It has been a fun series and the games have all been close. And then I just didn't like that play happened at the end. And I just thought it was unfortunate. Close. Yeah, well, a majority of the games have been close and exciting. And I saw other people say it Jason Timpf said he didn't like them not calling that push off, but he didn't blame the loss on it. And I just think, yeah, we don't want to see those kinds of things where it's like you could call it, you maybe could not call it, and it's a very important moment that decided the NBA Finals because the Pacers could have been up 3-1 if they potentially called that.
Yeah, and like I said, I thought SGA was not a good game for SGA, and until late, and there's a reason for that. No, it wasn't just the no calls, but I think the fact that Carlisle kept giving up the Nesmith matchup was pretty key. So I have a couple clips here. If you could bring up the Nesmith to Jumpy. So before you play this, you can just pause here. They're giving up the matchup here because SGA is in the center of the floor. So this is something that Dagnall started to go to more, and we see it both late in game 4 and in game 5. So it's harder to swarm him because the Thunder have their spacing on point here. I think before SGA gets this ball, like Nesmith needs to work harder to try to deny it here. And I would even go so far as to say, like, as soon as JDub throws the ball, Nembhard needs to uh just like run and double SGA. So then JDub would cut. That's on Siakam to stop that cut and then force Shea to through a double make that skip pass to Caruso. But instead they give up the Nesmith switch. And this first possession, before anything happens on this possession, Indiana's up 4. So it's 2 possession game, unless you get like a 4-point play on a 3-point shot with 3.5 minutes left. And I'm like, Indiana had already started to blow their lead. They had a double-digit lead in this game. I think they were up maybe 9 going into the fourth quarter. And I'm like, this is bad because SGA has been having a bad game. He has scored a bit in the last few possessions, and now you are giving him the jumpiest defender on the Pacers. And a lot of people have talked about you need to guard Shea with a bigger wing, a stronger wing. Nesmith, like, you got your hand on his arm. Like, read a scouting report, my guy. I'm sorry. Like, you can't just be giving them free points here. Like, he'd been missing his jumpers in this game. You need to, like, play it straight up if that's what you're going to do. And I don't even think that's what they should have done. Like, I just think this was a bad choice by Carlisle to be like, hey, we're going to give up this switch because we don't want to give up any threes. And I get that, not want to give up threes. Like, completely agree. Especially in this situation. No threes, no and ones. I'm always like, I'm just chanting that at my screen whenever the team I want to be up is up late in a game. No threes, no and ones.
Yeah.
But you can't give up free throws either because you stop the clock, right? And you give a guy who had been having a relatively inefficient game an opportunity to just get to the line easily and put points on the board.
Yeah, but this is part of my frustration too, is that is such a bullshit ticky-tack foul. And I get that that's
an obvious call though. Like you call that 9 times out of 10. No. Like his hand is on his arm and he goes into the shooting motion.
I think
that's
the league
that's
needs
shooting foul.
But the league needs to get rid of that completely. It's such bullshit.
That's fine. But that's a clear foul. And it's like you're not supposed to do that.
But I don't like that Scott Foster gave that to him and then didn't call a fully extended arm push off on him earlier. So he got the benefit of the calls on offense twice in a row in these sequences where he hit this shot to win the game. So it's complete screw job from Scott Foster, in my opinion. But
okay, well, the ones that I've got here, I've got the clip that you keep referring to, and we'll talk about that one last. But the ones I'm referring to here are just like obvious fouls that are that any player would get if they could get to this shot. And SGA is just really good at getting to a shot when he's got his defender compromised. Let's go. That's what it is. The next one is the free throws from his step through. Nesmith on him again. Nesmith is trying to deny here, kind of. It pushes SGA at least further out. This is late shot clock. And he's so jumpy, but SGA is like, I've got this guy compromised. I'm going for my step through move. And Nesmith gets him on the wrist on this move because he's like, shit, I have to recover. I got out of position, and now here we are.
Yeah.
Like this is an obvious foul. Like this
one sucked. And I thought, oh, he just hit him on the hand at first, but he definitely gets him on the wrist. They gotta call that. Yeah, that's a tough cover for Nesmith, and yeah, you don't necessarily want to put him in that position.
Yeah. So the last one I have here is the clip that you're talking about where SGA gets the push off. Empty side. Okay, can we just pause here? I am so annoyed when teams let another team go empty side and then don't double, because empty side spacing when there's no movement, because like they clear out, it's not like there's other actions happening on the backside that you need to worry about. It's a lot harder when they are doing that. They move, but only to clear out, to give SGA the space to drive on Nesmith here. You don't double, you don't get the ball out of his hands. The only time that Nembhard comes over is after Nesmith has been completely cleared out of the way because he is both too jumpy to stay with SGA on a very shifty drive, which is like, it's tough. Obviously, we talked about in our It was either our first show on this series or the last one, how I think SGA is the best driver in basketball just because of the variety of the creativity of his finishes and the variety of shots that he can get to on his drives. Like, you have no idea what he's going to do on a given drive.
Hmm.
I think it's really important to keep your defender off balance. Okay, now you can actually roll the clip. So here's the go ahead jumper. Drives on Nesmith. Shoulder bump. Nesmith goes flying. SGA creates the space and hits the jumper. One
Like
of the things
Nesmith
with this
sold
matchup,
this,
yeah.
but yeah.
One of the things with this matchup also is that, and the Nuggets talked about this in their series, how they got better as the series went along at absorbing SGA's like whatever arm contact. I forget how they phrased it. And I think Andrew Nemhard has done a great job of that throughout the series of absorbing that contact. Nesmith is not yet used to that matchup. So even though he's bigger and stronger than Nemhard, having the tools to deal with it and dealing with it and like being prepared for it are different. And SGA is like deceptively strong. So he can get some bigger guys out of the way if he needs to. That's why I think a lot of people agree that like a lot of the time it is better to guard him with a bigger wing, someone who has the strength to deal with it, but you still have to be prepared to deal with that. And Nesmith was not ready for that matchup. And I just thought like when I saw them just continuously giving him that Nesmith matchup in the fourth quarter when he'd been struggling all game with Nemhard on him, regardless of a couple buckets that he got like early in the fourth quarter, like Nemhard made everything tough and wasn't fouling because he knows
Yeah.
Shea's tendencies. I was just like, this is over.
Yeah.
Even before OKC took the lead, I was like, this is over.
And if you put
So
someone
yeah,
like that on SJ, who is the hardest person to stop on his drives, you're going to put yourself in a position where you can get those calls for someone who's maybe not as disciplined of a defender in those big moments. So even if you don't like the calls, which I don't, you don't have to give up that matchup.
yeah. I was just like, look, if you don't want the calls, like don't put your jumpiest defender on him that like isn't gonna get that hasn't been guarding him all series
Yeah.
and isn't like Nemhard had largely like the kinds of fouls he would take were like a off ball, like I'm just getting really physical on him. Like he wasn't really committing shooting fouls on SGA in this series because he's like I
He
played on
knows
the
when
Canadian
to,
national team together,
yeah.
like knows his tendencies, his like he's like this is my primary guy, right? So I just my thing was I hated them giving up that matchup and I blame Carlisle for that because in other instances earlier in the series when SGA got uh mismatches, they were like, we got to get the ball out of this guy's hands and like help this guy immediately. In this game, it was clear the strategy was completely different, and that was the directive. And so, Carlisle, coaching staff, whatever, that one's on you.
Yeah. It lost the
Um,
series probably.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, who
And the
knows? Who
Chet
knows?
offensive rebounds, right? 'Cause Chet was having a horrible game. That was a total turnaround too. It was a horrible Chet game, horrible Chet game. Uh, And then all of a sudden he's like, I'm just going to get every offensive rebound put back because Miles Turner's not doing anything. He's not boxing me out. He's completely ignoring me at the 3-point line. So I can just cut in and get these putbacks. It was just over and over and over. That was the Thunder's offense in that fourth quarter. So that was despite the score of the fourth quarter. I would say that was a really bad offensive quarter for OKC. It was just like Shea getting Nesmith out of position and getting to the free throw line, and Chet offensive
Yeah,
rebound putbacks was their
totally.
offense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that can work for them if, yeah, they're getting stops for sure.
Exactly. That too. That too. All right. Last note on this game was that I thought Dagnall, he's been searching because a lot of people have been talking about the issue with certain lineups in this series. He ended up starting Caruso over Case and Wallace in the second half of this game. Case and Wallace has been having like a rough series. We're going to talk about in game 5. He actually has a much better game. I think he's just more comfortable coming off the bench, knows his role a little bit easier and just like made shots, just maybe is more comfortable in like a smaller minutes role, for example. Which is interesting because it's like, well, yeah, young player, like first NBA finals experience and all that. And obviously Caruso is like their best player. I don't think that change actually did much for the Thunder because like I said, the Pacers were like in relatively firm control of that game 4 until
Hmm.
late in the third quarter as it was like, okay, so he's like getting stops now. But like I don't think this lineup change actually did much for like creating an immediate, like, oh, this completely changes the matchup kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Hey, when you play
Yeah.
clone ball, sometimes you don't know who to start because what's the benefit that you're getting over the
Yeah.
other?
True. Very true. All right, so let's talk game 5. OKC wins this one 120 to 109, and that score actually is like is pretty deceptive because I think OKC, this is what I would characterize as a blowout game, but the garbage time Pacers did their best to make this a little more interesting and maybe force the Thunder to put their starters back in, but they didn't end up having to do that. In this game, Dagnall actually started Hartenstein for everybody's double big obsession in this game. Hartenstein, I think he's lost his minutes in every game this series, which is very funny. He ended up being a -1
That's
in what was
weird.
ultimately a blowout win. They basically
'Cause
got out to the same start. Oh, go ahead.
I thought he was like pretty good. Like he was
Yeah,
making a lot of plays,
I agree.
but he's only -1. But so any
Right, but
weird
what
thing can
my
just
point
happen.
in mentioning that was not to say that our iHeart was bad or that these lineups didn't work, but more like this wasn't like some,
Juggernaut
exactly,
destruction lineup. Yeah.
exactly. Basically got off to the same start that OKC has in every game this series except for game 3, which was the one where Indiana controlled most of the way. But every other game, OKC has had really solid starts, like dominant starts, I would say, where they're up like 9, almost double digits before the first subs come in for the Pacers. Um, Indiana's defense was horrid in this game to start. I thought it was really bad. I was like, oh no, they might be dejected from the game 4 loss. The players were getting whatever they wanted early. SGA's drive and kick game was just, he was just getting whatever he wanted, and I thought that he was a lot more ready for the Indiana's swarms that were coming when he had a mismatch or was driving against somebody. They're like, bring 3 bodies, we got to go. He was looking for those kick out passes a lot more readily instead of necessarily like looking for his shot early, and it helps the guys who are actually hitting their shots. Something with I wanted to point out with Lou Dort, he's been on it in this series from 3. He's been over 40% in every single game except game 3, which he shot 33% from 3. So whatever. And in this game, SGA had a playoff high 10 assists, so he tied his high from this playoffs with 10 assists, and it was a lot of just drive and kick. And I thought he was
Killing
just like,
me.
I'm looking for the kick out pass because I know they're coming. And I don't, the other, like, you can know what coverage they're going to play on you, but they can still make it hard. Like, if you
Oh
look at the
yeah.
Thunder, where it's like, you know what they're going to do to you, and it doesn't matter because they play it so aggressively and they execute it well. Indiana was not, like, these were some lazy swarms here.
Yep.
And they were making the kick out pass obvious and easy. So the first one I have here is the Chet corner 3. And my note here was just that SJ is clearly looking for these shots. Now he sees Pascal coming. This is not aggressive help. Pascal has to come because SJ is blowing by Nemhard off this iHeart screen, which is one of the things that is a benefit of having Hartenstein on the floor is his screening.
And
Now Nemhard's behind him.
Nemhard and Miles weren't even like Miles is really playing the pass to Hartenstein, and it's like
And at
they're
that
not
point, it's
providing any
like,
resistance.
yeah, he's trying to play the pass to avoid the floater, and then Pascal's trying to take away the rim. So then, yeah, SGA just gets this easy corner 3 kick out pass to Chet, and Chet makes the shot. And Chet's shooting has been, I don't even know what the percentages are, but the shot, like, that's one of the shots that I didn't think I would say this last season because he was such an efficient 3-point shooter, but you just live with
Mm-hmm.
that shot if you're the
Yeah.
defense, by the way.
Yep.
But you maybe don't want it to be like totally wide open and like fully telegraphed and all of that, which is what Indiana was allowing.
Yeah, but like I said, I feel like my impressions was just that the Thunder always step up, and Chet can, even though he's inconsistent, will come out and like in the first quarter be like, I'm gonna hit some threes, and he does it. It's like, damn. I mean, good for them, but it's annoying it for me.
I mean, I guess, but these were really easy shots. It would have been like more like surprising / disappointing if they're missing some of these shots. So if you go to the Case and Wallace corner 3, Pick and roll with Kenrich Williams or pick and pop. Nemhard tries to veer switch there. And who is it that came in on that help? Was that Shepard? It was TJ with the strong side help because I don't know what they're doing with Pascal here. They're trying to take away Shea's driving lane. And Miles is trying to take Chet in the dunker. And then, yeah, Case and Wallace corner 3. Maybe Indiana does lift the shot because, like I said, Case and Wallace had been struggling earlier in this series. But this again brings up my earlier point about not switching with Pascal Siakam on Shea. Like, I don't really understand the point of running. Like, you have to punish pick and pop. Like, they're running pick and pop with Kenrich Williams, who's not going to post up Andrew Nemhard. Like, I don't know what the threat of a switch here is. Besides what we talked about in our last show, which is like, oh, then Shea could run Pascal through pick and roll. But then you have Miles there, and that's just a different dynamic than I don't know. That was the same clip that we'd gone through, where it's like Miles and drop and Pascal trying to navigate a screen. But Shea's not going to necessarily do that every time. And even if he does, I don't think that you want to keep giving up wide open, strong side corner threes. Especially when the pass is completely unaffected. Like, this isn't we got a deflection and they bobbled the ball and we give the defense a chance to recover back to the guy to keep the shot from going up. These were like
the smoothest in rhythm, open. I trust obviously Wallace more than Chet to shoot an open 3. Just because I think he's a really good shooter.
Maybe in the regular season. He wasn't really making that much against us except for game 4.
Yeah, I just think Chet's been more inconsistent lately. Like, I thought his 3 might be a pain point or like somewhat of a story of the game, of the series, but it hasn't really been bad enough to cause any issues for them. And I thought this would, even in the same line of thinking, I thought the Pacers would find more like open corner threes, and they've definitely hit shots. But, you know, with the Thunder giving up corner threes and packing the paint, like, this is stuff I thought the Pacers could do more, but they became more stagnant in the past 2 games than I would have thought.
Yeah. Oh, there was another one that was the Case and Wallace above the break 3. These are all like early in the game. I was actually late starting this game because I just come from the start, and I was like, oh, the Thunder are shooting 60% from 3 right now. I don't think they finished like that on the game, so I was like, maybe they'll cool off. We'll see what happens. But Shea's looking for this pass. Like, Case and Wallace does a good job lifting to the wing. Hallie has to make a decision because he's kind of tagging Hartenstein here. Shea does a good job of watching like what's Hallie doing, forces him to make that decision, gets in a little bit deeper before he makes the kick out pass, and then Case and Wallace gets a wide open in rhythm 3. And this shot doesn't always go in, but this one did, and I was like, oh, if the Pacers could get a stop here and keep it to 13, that's a win, because they were getting like soundly outplayed this entire half. I will say right after this shot, Benedict Mathurin does make a pretty tough layup that I think was pretty important just to keep the lead kind of manageable. But that was really tough. And then with SGA here, I've got there's a guard-to-guard screen. They ran a lot of this with JDub, especially in the second half of this game. And Andrew Nemhard is not doing a good job of navigating the situation. He, like, SGA just rejects the screen. It's right by him. This is what SGA would like to do. Like, this is the Shea that he was last year, right?
Yeah.
Where he's just constantly rejecting screens, and you like know exactly what he's going to do, but you can't stop it because you're just completely like, you know it, but you're not prepared. And they, go ahead.
I feel like Nesmith was communicating, calling out the screen, and as soon as Nemhard, I think, turned his head to like check out the situation, Shea was like, oh, this is my perfect time to drive. And that's just because there's no way Nemhard, like, I know Shea's hard to guard, but Nemhard's not that bad of a defender. I think Shea just was very crafty.
This was not Nemhard's best defensive game, I will say. Although I still think he does the best job on SGA of anybody on that team. It was just like, it's not about the shots he makes over you, but the process was just really bad, because then you're just allowing the other team to get the shots that you don't want to give up if you're the Pacers, which is apparently wide open threes. And we'll talk about how they changed their defense a little bit actually next. So SGA ends up hitting this turnaround over TJ McConnell. And this was at a point in the game where the Pacers were trying to stop their help So it's similar to what I was talking about in the game 4 with Nesmith, where they're like, "Okay, you gotta help here." But the Pacers are trying to mount a comeback, so they're like, "Don't give up a 3." We know TJ can stay in front of him and avoid a layup, and we just kind of hope he misses his jumper. SJ is shooting 48% from mid-range in the playoffs. Um,
Yeah,
so
why are you living with that? Like McConnell
I
and like
guess you're
not
just
doing
kind of like,
something.
if he does miss, then we got to stop. And if he doesn't miss, it's just a 2 and not a 3. And OKC had been on fire earlier in this game, so like I get that, but again, you don't necessarily have to keep giving up a 3, even if you're swarming, if your swarms are good. Their swarms had not been good in this game.
Hmm. Yeah, it was
Um,
just the
yeah.
defense was awful in this game for the Pacers all the way around almost.
So that's right, but except there was this stretch in the third quarter and early in the fourth where they do settle in defensively finally. And I thought TJ McConnell just kind of put the team on his back. I have an example clip here, but he was just an unstoppable scorer in both his shifts in the first and second halves here. This was such a tough drive on JDub into this turnaround fadeaway, and he looked so comfortable. Like, I thought this was like a bailout, like, I've accidentally put myself like, buried myself too deep in here, and I just gotta get a shot off. But TJ was just, like, expecting that shot to go in.
Yeah. I don't expect him to be able to create that much space on J-Dub,
I mean, he
off of
didn't
like a
create that much
post
space, but
move.
you don't need that much to get to that turnaround.
I just think he was probably quicker than J-Dub even expected
Yeah.
and was like not even like I think with more experience he may have like known how to play that better, but it was a great move by McConnell.
And with a lot of other players, this is a turnover, but I don't even remember if I mentioned this on the last show, but something with TJ that you can give him credit for in a matchup like this against OKC is just that because he's so short and because he keeps his dribble so close to his body, it's harder to force a turnover on him unless he's like put himself in a really compromising position. So he kind of avoid the kinds of turnovers that other sort of lankier dribblers might have, a Chet, a Siakam, even a Halliburton, for example. Um, yeah, so that was just really tough. TJ ended up with 18 points in this game, and it was really sad because I was like, "Oh my god, they're getting the TJ the TJ McConnell game." And we already got another TJ McConnell game in this series where he had 10, 5 assists and 5 steals, but we got the TJ scorer game and it was just a really rough Tyrese Halliburton game.
Ugh, God, only 4 points.
You talked about how stagnant Indiana has looked in the latter games of this series, and part of it is due to this injury. He's dealing apparently with a calf strain. We still don't know the results of the MRI, I think,
Mm-mm,
in terms of
not
what
yet.
grade it is, but he's not moving well. But I'm going to say, even earlier in the series, like first couple games, when he's against Lou Dort, he's not getting anything. So I don't think that the calf strain is affecting that particular matchup, but it is affecting his ability to get separation from other guys. And now you're just like in a real bind where your best player's not able to like create anything.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about OKC's defense. So Tyrese tries to run pick and roll with Obi Toppin, and this got completely shut down on this possession where oh wait, that's not.
This
Is that the pick and roll
was
with Obi?
yeah. Which one do you want?
Uh-oh. That's the one that I wanted. That's not the clip though.
Mm.
My bad. Okay, I'll just describe it. So Tyrese is running pick and roll with Obi Toppin, and Chet's able to completely, like, easily recover back to that. This is like the thing where you're like, I have multiple rollers on the floors, I have multiple pick and roll threats, so you can't just like mix up the matchups on me and like shut down the pick and roll game. For example, like what the Celtics did with the Mavs in the finals last year, where they put Tatum on Lively. Then it's like, well, I'm forced to run pick and roll with Derek Jones Jr., who's kind of like their OB top. It's like, oh, he's got some vertical pop and all that. But it's not the same level of rim threat as, I mean, in this case, Obi is probably the best vertical rim threat on the Pacers, but he doesn't have the same like downhill like strength. Like, I'm gonna get through this guy and like definitely finish, especially if Chet's quick enough to recover. So that's what happened, and then they weren't able to score. I actually thought Obi was a lot better in this game as a slasher than when he was used in pick and roll. So if you could bring up the one where he didn't always score, he gets to Chet in transition here in semi transition, gets Chet completely out of the way, then totally smokes his slam and they don't score here, which was like these are the kinds of shots you want to get back if you're Indiana. Because you're like, man, we finally created some separation here, and then they don't score. I think OKC gets the rebound. But there's another possession in the second half of the game where he does get past Chet and ends up scoring on a really tough, like, sweeping hook. And here, like, Dort probably gets that rebound, but you do have 2 Pacers in place, so you never know. Uh, you want Nemhard, like, you want some other guy trying to box out Dort here if you're trying to go for the offensive rebound. But anyway, they end up scoring because he hits this tough shot. I think t Obi just does a good job of, like, I can be faster than you and, like, get as long as I can get this ball in the rim, like, it's got a chance. I mean, he was better in this game than Hallie. I actually thought he was pretty good. It was just, like, he was struggling as a roller, but I thought he was pretty good as a slasher, out-rebounded Miles Turner. Like, it was what like, I actually thought, as I going back to watch these clips, I was like, "Okay, I need to see more specifically how OKC shut them down defensively." But I came to the conclusion that all but, uh Hallie, who was like an atrocious offensive game, Miles Turner, who just hasn't been good offensively this entire series, and Andrew Nemhard, who like had arguably the worst like 3 turnover stretch of the playoffs in that fourth quarter as the Blazers were trying to mount their comeback. Where actually everybody else was like above average, above their like standard offensively in this game, and it was just like we need our best players to yeah. That graphic would be circulating. Yeah, so good TJ McConnell game. A lot of people said that TJ should have played more than he did. I was surprised to see Pascal Siakam only had 33 minutes logged in this game. That's insane to me. That's like beyond Mark Dagnall level. Although he has played Chet like 20 minutes before. But Pascal's better than Chet. Like that's like if JDub only played 30 minutes, which I actually haven't checked how many he played in this particular game. But like, yeah, see, like there's nobody on that team that should be like causing Pascal Siakam to only play 33 minutes in an NBA Finals game. So that like another bad coaching game from Carlisle, in my opinion. He was really key for them in that fourth quarter stretch as they were trying to come back, and obviously they don't mount it, but I just think, like, you gotta play your best guys more. Like, you just like yeah, and I think they did that, and Pascal had 28 points in 33 minutes. Like, he was cooking, although he also had 6 turnovers, which is not great. Um It's they had 22 as a team. This is just one of those things where, like, Hallie was off and everybody else is trying to do more, and some of them were able to rise to the occasion in certain respects, but others were not. Like, a lot of the reason that Nemhard was having those turnovers is that they were trying to get Hallie off ball more, so Nemhard was initiating. That's good, like, wrinkle to go to, but I don't even think he was under a lot of pressure from OKC in these turnover they were just, like, inexplicably bad turnovers from Andrew Nemhard, so I don't even wanna give him that excuse, but it was just like, you need your best player to be better than that in order to beat this team, you know? Um, alright, last little segment about this game. This was the JDub game. Like, he was incredible. Will, if you could bring up the picture of the JDub note from so this was from my notes on the last show. where we went through our last segment and we talked about what are the concerns for the Pacers, and my top one, and really the only like major one, was JDub's drives. I was like, look, if JDub has figured out that he can get all the way to the rim on this team with little to no resistance, and the Pacers have no answer for him, like, it's over. Like, your hope is that J-Dub keeps settling for his pull-up jump shots. He actually made a few of those in this game too, but he was unstoppable for Indiana. Like, they had 0 answer for him in this game. He ended up with 40 points on 14 of 25 shooting. 20 of those shots were from 2. He had 18 points in the paint by himself. Uh, no. Because Shea won them game 4 and he was better for more of it. Like, it would take SGA being like, it would take Indiana pushing it to 7, SGA being bad in both games, and Jada being good in both games, and them winning game 7 at this point. Yeah. SGA would have to be bad in the next 2 games. Like, he'd have to be worse than he was even in game 4, which I think was one of his worst games of the playoffs until the 4th quarter. So, I don't think that's happening. All right. We gotta like so here is Jada in transition. They get the steal on Pascal, and he's just down the floor before anybody else. I think Indiana struggles with their transition. Like, Miles Turner's like, damn it, and then they're trying to get back, and this is just bad floor balance. I don't know if Nemhard was supposed to be in front of him at that point, or if Nesmith was supposed to take him. Like, you got to stop the rim, ball in rim, ball in rim. Nesmith is in front of Shea. Yeah, it was just like, this is what happens when you get turnovers deep in the paint, is that you got bad floor balance and nobody's back, and Pascal's the last one back there. So that was bad. Cuts were a problem for Indiana, and this is another thing that Indiana generally struggles with, but they've been better about for key games in the playoffs. So this game was actually like, when I said their defense was horrid in this game, it wasn't just like, oh, Nemhard having a worse defensive game one-on-one against Shea, or Nesmith getting cooked by Shea, or anything like that. It was like all of the defensive principles that it seemed like they had elevated in the playoffs just completely fell. Sorry, that's loud. Completely fell back down to earth in this game defensively. Who this is transition also, Pascal, gotta get back here. So that's not the both these picks are not great transition defensive possessions from Pascal, and obviously he causes the turnover on the last one too. Um but we talked about SGA rejecting the screen on that guard to guard screen, which happened multiple times in that game. That was just a representative clip, but JDub as well. If you could bring up the clip of him rejecting the screen. This is not a guard to guard action. He's just running some pick and roll with Chet, gets all the way downhill, and then, easy layup off the glass there. Uh, Sheds. Yep. Yep. Nesmith gets completely turned around here. And I'm like, bro, it's J-Dub. Go under. What are we doing? Like, why are we making this more difficult on ourselves than it needs to be defensively? It's very like Nesmith. I don't want to put this on him necessarily, but this reminds me of a player that is a high energy, high effort guy that can be super impactful, but isn't like a reads the scouting report guy to understand the tendencies of the guys he's going up against. Because at this point, I'm looking at this and I'm like, why are you going over the screen? Why are you going over a JDub screen? This is I don't know if that's the case for Nisbet. So I don't want to put that on him, but in the instances that we've looked at with him on Shea and J-Dub too, we talked about this in the last show. J-Dub feels very comfortable cooking Nesmith from like anywhere on the floor. And I'm just like, dude, you gotta at least make it a tough shot. And in this game, at least in the last one, you could say like, okay, J-Dub's like getting to like a tough pull up, or like a little runner as he drives him and kind of bumps him and gets like into the lane, but doesn't even touch the paint. But in this one, it was just like getting all the way downhill, getting Nesmith completely turned around and then shedding him and just he's gone, right? So this was a very bad defensive game for the Pacers. The last clip of JDub I have here is just him playing off of SGA. So SGA, this is a drive and kick possession, gets past Nesmith. Nesmith's like, this was like not even a bump that I would want to be called, honestly. But Nesmith's just like, he's so jumpy that he's already off balance. That when he gets like the smallest bump, he goes all the way back. That's the thing with like from a just like a being more sound in your technique situation. It's one of those things where you're watching this and you're like, Nesmith is a good defender, right? But it makes you appreciate what guys like Christian Brown and Andrew Nemhard are able to do more because at least, even if he's making the shot, you're able to force Shea into tougher shots and force OKC's offense into tougher situations. So he's able to make this easy kick out. Andrew Nemhard tries to play kind of the gap, and then JDub is like, I can get all the way down to all the way to the rim now, and then it's just over. He's watching chat. This is Jada was very quick off this drive. I think this is one of those things where you got to just stay sound. Where you've got Nesmith and Nemhard already behind him. I can't blame the other three guys on the back line. And he's like, "I'll take Chet." Just the like this those are the margins though, right? Like, to quote, I don't know, I can't actually quote him because I can't remember the exact quote. But in hockey, the Panthers coach Paul Maurice is talking about the difference in like the good defensive games and the bad ones. It's like it's just 1 or 2 feet off. Like your stick was 1 or 2 feet off from getting that puck deflection. 1 or 2 feet. In basketball, it's even smaller margins. It's inches, right? Or milliseconds that you're trying to move to get in front of a guy in time to be able to make a play on the ball. On JDub's drives, which is the last big question of the show here. Why do you think Indiana has been so hesitant to play the zone card, especially as their defense is sort of degraded as the series has gone on? Like we were praising it after game 1, and it wasn't even that bad in game 2. It was really more of a bad offensive game in that one. Game 3, they were pretty good. But like game 4 and 5 were some of the worst defensive games I've seen all playoffs, if I'm being honest. In terms of like late game 4 and then in terms of like game plan, and then game 5 was just like game plan, execution, all of it. Like, what's going on here? I think it took a lot out of them.
I think I'm muted. I'm sorry. But the Pacers had a lot of energy, a lot of physicality on D in game 3. I think that they were like happy with how they'd been performing defensively, and that's something people have talked about. And we talked about that we were impressed with their ability to step that aspect of their game up. And so I could get how maybe they were like, I don't want to go away from it too much. But on the other token, you probably should throw some things out there because it had been good, and you can throw them out of rhythm a little bit with it and make them think. Those passes and those reads were pretty clear for them in the game, in the film we just watched. So
Yeah.
try to give them a different look, like something. But I
just
don't know.
think that the Pacers underestimated how much energy it would take to keep up that aggressive of defensive coverages to the degree that they needed to against this team. And I think they're just kind of gassed right now, if I'm being completely honest. Like, that's what I was getting from this defensive tape. Honestly, it reminded me of the Thunder's game 3 defensively, where I'm just like, what are we doing? Now, yeah, my question was about, like, why haven't they run more zone? But a lot of what we're talking about is, like, execution. Like, you need to do this better. But if they're too tired to run these aggressive schemes effectively, like maybe you go to something a little bit less aggressive that can kind of rest them a little bit and then throw the aggressive stuff in spurts, like swarming a bit more, playing more man, switching, which they haven't been doing at all really this series. Except giving SGA the Nesmith matchup, right? That's when they decide to switch. Or giving SGA the TJ McConnell matchup is when they decide to switch. So yeah, it's been a weird game plan series, I think, as it's gone on for Carlisle. But also, I think the Pacers are starting to run out of gas defensively. Obviously, offensively, if Halliburton like can't play or is limited, like it's over, right? We did see last year TJ McConnell led Pacers able to take the Celtics to a few close games offensively, but I think that's a different story this year. Not just because like TJ's a year older and like all of that stuff, but the Thunder are a better defense than last year's Celtics. And I praised that Celtics defense last year. I thought that was their main strength.
Hmm.
But the level of aggressiveness and what you need to do in terms of keeping up a 95% or better level of execution in order to get anything on a given possession, I think is just really tough. But defensively, I just think there's a lot of meat left on the bone for the Pacers, honestly. So, last thing I'll ask you is just your predictions for game 6 as they go back to Indiana and try to extend this series. What do you think is going to happen?
Mm. Is there a chance that the Thunder could have a letdown game in some senses where they know Hallie's hurt, they feel like they're in control, maybe they want to close it out in front of their fans, kind of a thing, but don't mess around with your food. But I just think that OKC, they've never done that. Even when they look kind of lazy, they're still really good.
Yeah.
So there's a chance maybe it could be close, and then they like lock down, like, hey, let's just get this. But I feel like the series is over. I feel like they're gonna win the next game. Hallie's hurt.
I
He may not
felt
even
that way in our
play.
series though, and then they like that game 6 was a really good Nuggets game, but it was also not a good Thunder game at the same
Yeah.
time. So, will they do that again or did they learn from that series? Like, okay, let's try to get this done a little bit earlier. Let's friggin' close it out and win the title. Like I think it's a different question when you're in round 2 versus like we're in the finals, we're up 3-2, we're one game away from being NBA champions. I feel like the hunger is like a little bit higher then, but who knows? I'm not in that Thunder locker room. Um I just think they're going to play like a mid-level game. I think Indiana can win, but they have to bring a way better defensive effort. This is like with or without Hallie. I think that that Indiana could win Game 6. I don't think they win the series, obviously, especially without Halliburton. But I think they can win Game 6 at home. Like make a bunch of shots in front of your home crowd. Hope the Thunder miss their shots and just play better. Like you have to play up to OKC's level. So I don't think they're going to play badly in this game. They're going to play
Hmm.
I don't think they're gonna bring, like, a game 7 intensity, but I think they're gonna be, like, we're gonna be at 80%,
They're gonna
and that's gonna be enough to beat you if you don't bring your A game.
they have the closeout bump. Like, it's tough to close any team out, especially the finals.
Yeah.
They're trying as hard as they can. I just think the Halliburton injury is what's making me feel pretty despondent about their chances to come back at this point, which is really unfortunate because I
Well,
would
Hallie
love.
he can't get by anybody anyway, so I hope like, if he's injured, I hope he just doesn't play.
Yeah, I think there's a chance he could not, but also he could just be like, screw that. It's the finals. I'm playing no matter what. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
going to
true.
play. He's not going to miss, but
I mean, he did miss games in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, which is not the same as the finals, but it's as close as you get, right?
yeah.
If it's bad enough, especially if it's like a grade 2 strain. He had calf tightness for a while, and it must have gotten bad enough to the point where they're like, we need an MRI now. So that's the other kind of factor here. Rick Carlisle says that Tyrese is a game time decision tomorrow, so that'll be really interesting. But yeah, I think OKC is starting to just show that they're the better team here. We'll see, because I said the same thing in round 2 again, but this is the NBA Finals, so different question. Um, we'll see. We'll see what happens tomorrow in Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Any last words you want to say on this series before we sign off?
I'm excited for it to And in some senses, because the offseason is shaping up to possibly be pretty wild with the amount
Oh,
of
look at Will.
trades and
What a
rumors.
small
And
market hater. You hate this NBA Finals, and all you want to talk about is trade rumors. You're
yes,
basically Stephen A. Smith.
I want to talk about how bad Memphis is as a city. No, I've never been there. I don't. I think it's so annoying Stephen A. saying stuff like that. But
Is that what he's saying now? I I
yeah,
I mute all ABC and ESPN broadcasts
as you
now.
should.
Like
And if
it's
you're
just
listening to this, you
no.
should do that too. Follow Grace's lead. Don't watch ESPN. Don't repost their stuff. Don't, even
I
if you
don't
want to
repost their
complain about
stuff.
them on Twitter, don't do it. Just ignore them.
Yeah,
But
they want you to complain about them.
he did say, he's like, Memphis is a horrible city. No one wants to go there. It's really bad. The
I
crime's
will say
bad. Whatever.
seeing the memes around did kind of make me want to download Solitaire, so I did do that.
That was pretty
I
funny.
wasn't playing it during the games though. I was playing Solitaire while watching the post game like podcasts and things. But
When I have been able to watch these games live, which hasn't been a lot, I have been just playing chess on my phone during the game. But I'm not covering the game during the halftime of the NBA Finals. But
that's true. You're not getting
yes.
paid millions of dollars to do so either.
And I do rewatch the highlights to
Actually,
prepare
Stephen
for
A.
the
Smith
show.
has paid billions of dollars to generate, fake cheap engagement, which he's
Mm.
doing. So
So
I
he
guess
doesn't
he
need
is
to
doing
watch
his
the
job.
game. He's doing his
Yeah.
job. Yeah, so true.
All right. Well, for everybody who made it this far, we really appreciate you guys for, helping to support what I like to think of as substantive content. Maybe you disagree.
For how long it is, so we definitely try.
If you like our content, please remember to click the like button and the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content. Leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your frenemies. Don't tell your enemies, actually, because they might give us a bad review. But if you think they'll give us a good review, then you should tell your enemies. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok. All our social links are in the description. Will is making some more shorts now. We'll do some more things in the off season. We'll see what happens there. But we're looking forward to it, and hopefully at some point Denver decides that they want to participate in said off season and have a front office and do all the things. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks. And, it doesn't even have to be your basketball team that wins. Go Panthers.